This meeting is being live streamed and recorded for publication on the Council's website. So we will now proceed with the October agenda for 17th of October 2024. We're skipping apologies and urgent items of business because obviously they've already been adequately covered. Item 3, declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest to make? Councillor Sisterson.
Yes, so item 6, the land west of Park Lane. I'll have to excuse myself from that as I've already previously had put a comment opposed to it on the council website.
Thank you, Councillor. So you'll recuse yourself from that when we come to that debate, okay. Anybody else with any declarations of interest or no? Thank you. So item 5 on the agenda is land adjacent to Bulgennon House and Wick Place Cottage, pages 5 to 48 in your packs. And may I ask Richard Elder to give the report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is an application for a crematorium and an associated wetland sequestration area within the green belt on the edge of Bulvan Village. Bulvan Village is located towards the north of the borough, and the Thurrock area is effectively served by the South Essex Crematorium to the west side of the borough and the Basildon Crematorium to the right-hand side of the borough. The site is an open, rural, agricultural piece of land. It's currently occupied by grass, dense scrub, scattered trees and hedges. We have, just to the northwest of the site, Wick Place Cottage, which is a non-designated asset, heritage asset. To the south, we have Portland Lodge, which is another residential property. And to the west is the main area of Bulvan Village, Bulvan Village Hall, up to the northwest. This is a 3D aerial view of the site, which shows more of the rural feel and countryside surrounding the application site. And to the left, which is the southeast, we have a commercial industrial estate, and to the northwest area here is the Bonham Grange residential development, which is still under construction. This is Wick Place Cottage here and Portland Cottage Lodge down here. So if we go on to the site location plan, which the application is outlined in red, we can see the Brentwood Road to the northwest of the site here is a one-way road where the existing site entrance is shown here to the west of the site. This is the existing site entrance, which is an old gate, and it's effectively like an agricultural access. We have to the bottom here of this, we have the A128, where the Brentwood Road joins the junction here, close to the entrance of the existing site. This is the proposed block plan, which is an indicative layout for the crematorium. To the top area, we've got the crematorium building here, and to the rear, close to the edge of the countryside boundary, is the landscaping and an area of servicing for staff, car parking. There is a large car park to the west of the building for 130 cars, and this is accessed by a new access road through here from an amended new junction. This is the new junction to Brentwood Road and the A128. So the existing Brentwood Road, which is a narrow country road, will be stopped up at this section here, and it'll curve around onto this new access road where you can turn left and right. If you turn right, you'll be heading back onto the A128, where you've got the choice of turning left or right onto this busy road. This gives traffic flows north and south, whereas previously it was only traffic flows south. We've got shown a wetland sequestration area which covers most of the southern area of the site. This is defined as an area to isolate and store carbon dioxide. And this feeds into the offsetting of the development as a net carbon zero development, where it'll be run off electricity. We've got some photographs of the site which show its rural open countryside and the hedge to the Brentwood Road. This is another photograph which shows the dense scrub, hedges, scattered trees around the site, and to show that it's the open rural countryside to the east, behind. This is a photo view of Brentwood Road, which shows the application site to the left-hand side and shows that it's a narrow country road with no pavements or pedestrian access at this point in the road to access the crematorium. This is a view of the junction of Brentwood Road here and the A128, and showing the application site to the boundary here behind the hedge. We've got some indicative elevation plans. The top one is the front elevation plan, which faces into the site and the car parking area. The next is the rear elevation, and then below that are two side elevations, which are, I'll emphasize, are indicative. If we move on to the indicative floor layout plan, it shows two chapels, one on each side, with two separate entrances. We've got a crematory room and flue to the center here. Here we have some 3D images, which shows the enclosed formal gardens to the rear, again, indicative, a rear yard, and this will be the servicing area to the rear, next to the landscaping, and then the parking area in this section. Another 3D image which shows the front elevation of the proposed crematorium with the two entrances with canopies to the frontage and the parking area again, which is only partially shown on this 3D image. If I can just sum up, that the proposal constitutes inappropriate development in the greenbelt and would lead to the loss of openness of fenland landscape, harm to the existing identified fen character, and harm to the purposes of the greenbelt. The identified harm to the greenbelt is not outweighed by other considerations such as need, and therefore a case for very special circumstances does not exist. The site is situated in an unsustainable location in relation to public transport. Access to the site by sustainable travel modes are severely limited, thus unlikely that visitors to the site will arrive by any means other than by car, and thus would constitute unsustainable development. And insufficient information has been submitted to justify the change of use of a 4-hectare area of the site for provision of a wetland sequestration area to facilitate an electric net carbon zero development. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Richard. We'll come back to Richard, obviously, after we've had a couple of statements. So, firstly, a statement of support has been received from Russell Barnes. It can be found on pages 5 to 6 of the speaker's booklet. Russell, if you're here, could you come down and take a seat? So, you'll have 3 minutes when Carly's back at her seat. Sorry. You'll have 3 minutes to make your statement, and you may start.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in relation to this application tonight. As members will be aware, there's currently no crematorium in Thurrock, and based on the applicant's engagement with a range of local faith leaders and persons of interest, there is a clear desire and need for one. In response to this, the applicant has advanced an outline application with all matters reserved, all of which will come forward if the principle of the proposal can be agreed. The application has been running for approximately 12 months, with numerous reports and assessments commissioned. Members should note that 2 additional reports were recently completed that have removed the previous officer's objections relating to highways, flood risk, and surface water strategies. As stated, the application currently reserves all matters, landscape being one, but the vision is to deliver a responsive development that makes use of the tranquil setting and the opportunity to have a quiet, reflective space within the countryside so as to provide a cremation service that is inclusive, respectful, and peaceful for all faiths in a rural setting. The vision for the landscape will seek biodiversity enhancements, vibrant wildlife habitats, and the sequestration wetland areas that will also be addressed within the reserved matters, with the Statutory Consultee for Ecology raising no objections to the proposal. When layout, scale and appearance are addressed as reserved matters, the net carbon zero design elements and details will also be finalised. These will include renewable and sustainability strategies. As such, the applicant feels that half of the refusal points are possibly premature and will be addressed through the reserved matters process. Members will note the officer's comments in relation to the Greenbelt, it being an unsustainable location and loss of openness. But the applicant has put forward their case for very special circumstances for Thurrock to have their own crematorium and feel that this outweighs the harm. As a point of clarity, comments have been made and raised about the accuracy of the data used by the applicant in relation to the number of cremations per facility. This information came from the Cremation Society website, a reliable source of information and publicly accessible. Any further data held by these local facilities does not appear in the public domain. In addition, travel times can be debated between peak and off-peak journeys, but the applicant feels strongly that Thurrock needs a crematorium, and they firmly believe that this site is the appropriate setting for such a facility to be located. The applicant feels, on balance, there is a tangible need and support for the local community and its faith leaders for a multi-faith crematorium, with the remaining reasons for refusal being addressed through reserved matters or outweighed by the very special circumstances which do exist. We hope that members are able to support this application to finally bring a crematorium to Thurrock. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Before you go, any questions for Russell from the committee? No? Oh, Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. Was there something that attracted you towards a crematorium and not a housing estate? Because normally we'd see a housing estate for a scheme like this. Why was it the crematorium you decided to go for? Thank you.
Is that okay to answer through the chair? So the early engagement for the applicant was very much focused on what community needs were currently not being catered for. And the crematorium was one of the first things that came out of that engagement. So there was no interest in any of that discussions with faith leaders and the wider community about delivering housing on this site. It's always been a crematorium is needed, and this is an ideal site for that to be placed.
Stephen Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. I'm sure when I read this today, I read something about there had previously been an application for a nursing home. Is that right? Sorry.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, that's correct. So on a previous agent, they'd looked at the larger part of the site to deliver more facilities. But again, on balance, because we're now bringing a carbon zero application, we need more of the site for the sequestration area to bring in that biodiversity, to bring our carbon capture in, and obviously get that level down so that we can achieve it. So that's why we've only got the crematorium on this scheme.
But the previous one was refused, wasn't it? Or
I believe so, with a different agent,
okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Councillor Byrne.
Can you take us through the carbon zero bit? As far as I've read, a single cremation creates 400 kilos of CO2. How are you going to overcome that?
Through the chair. So I don't have the specific data, mainly because this application has looked at the principle of development as its primary function, to obviously bring this with an outline application with all matters reserved. But the initial observations and the work that's been carried out They believe that the electric facility, with the area of land that we have available to us to create that carbon capture as an offset, is achievable to get a zero carbon facility to work in this location.
Councillor Byrne.
In that plan, did I see a big chimney? What are you going to capture through that?
It's offsetting, so it's not always the case of the building doesn't produce any carbon. It's about the scheme in its entirety.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Barnes. You may sit down. We have had a statement of objection from Janet McShane, which can be found on pages 6 to 7 of the Speaker's booklet. This statement will be read by Mr. Leslie Newells. Mr. Newells, if you're there. So when I get the tip off, you'll have 3 minutes, and if you press the button on the right, it'll turn your microphone on.
Good evening, Chair and members. My name is Les Knowles, and I am a Balford resident. I am representing the Chair of Balford Village Community Forum and have been asked to address the committee on behalf of local residents from Balford Village and its surrounding rural areas. I am here this evening to express our objection to the outline planning application for the crematorium project, which represents inappropriate development within the green belt and would bring significant harm to our local landscape and environment. Your officer's report clearly summarises that no special circumstances have been provided by the applicant to make a case for the development within the green belt. The applicant has also failed to provide any evidence of a site assessment to justify why this particular site has been selected. The proposal raises a long list of technical concerns and issues which are all documented in the objections by your highways, landscape, ecology and urban design officers. Another most concerning issue is that the applicant is unable to provide any credible evidence that there is a justified need for this type of facility in this particular locality. Local residents' objections include a lack of justified need, substantial local road safety concerns despite the redesign of the access, wholly insufficient public transport provision, generally poor overall amenity access, concerning loss of green belt protection, unjustifiable environmental pollution and damage. The need to consider far more appropriate sites, for instance, existing brownfield or industrial sites, well away from any residential locations, and much more accessible to the Thurrock hubs of population who, it is suggested, will actually use the amenity. These have all been included in the various submissions by residents, councillors, officers and other concerned parties. We believe that any one of these objections is enough to justify the scheme's rejection, and therefore, taken together, we urge the members of the committee to quickly and decisively turn down the application. Thank you for your time this evening and for giving the residents an opportunity to voice their concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Newells. Any questions for Mr. Newells? No? Then you may sit down. Thank you very much. And we have also received a statement of objection from Ward Councillor Barry Johnson, which can be found on page 7 of the Speaker's booklet. Councillor Johnson, would you like to come up and read your statement?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just start by saying I have absolutely no objection to Thurrock having its own crematorium, but I'm here tonight on behalf of the residents who have asked me to speak and say that this isn't the place for it. I will be very quick, as I do not have much more to add to the officer's proposal to refuse the application. However, I would like to reiterate the most important factor in my own mind and a lot of residents, and that is the possibility of so many vehicles entering from and exiting onto the A128 in such large groups that funeral processions are likely to facilitate will see this road become even more of a hazard, and it is far too close to residential properties, which would disrupt village life beyond any beneficial advantage the crematorium might, in other circumstances, provide. Thank you, Chair. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions for Councillor Johnson? No? Thank you very much. You may take your seat. So, to go back to the presentation by Richard, our planning officer, at this stage I'd like to invite the councillors to ask any questions they wish. Councillor Byrne and then Stephen Taylor. Councillor Byrne.
Yes, well, the obvious ones is obviously not, it's not material that we haven't got a crematorium in Thurrock. But the other one is carbon dioxide or carbon emissions. Is that material in rejecting this plan? Would you take these, like the 400 kilos of CO2 and that's going into Thurrock? Would that be material in rejecting it?
I'm not sure what figures you're referring to, but I'll just sort of refer to what they have submitted, or the lack of what they've submitted.
They haven't submitted anything to do with carbon emissions of that.
So they're using a large 4-hectare area of the site as a wetland sequestration area to offset the development, and also it's an electric facility. So they're using that to store and isolate carbon dioxide in the ground. That's all we know, but we've been given no figures. We've got no reports on this. We don't know if it's feasible or if it can be delivered. This is what we've asked for, but we haven't received it.
So is that, so that's what I'm trying to get, is that enough to reject it because of lack of information, basically?
Yes, because they have to demonstrate that it is deliverable. Otherwise, we could approve it, and then they can come back to us and say, sorry, we haven't done the figures on this. It can't be an offset or a net carbon zero development.
Steve.
Thanks, Chair. Richard, interestingly, what you've just said about what's been submitted, because I'm sure Mr. Barnes was saying that they're going to use an offset which could be anywhere in the UK, or it doesn't have to be on the site, as I understand it. Yes, no?
I am not aware of that.
That's fine. My second question, and I got slightly confused, and this might be more appropriate for Julian, is about the changed access. Am I right in assuming, and because the plans weren't orientated sort of north-south and so on, is it just a T-junction that's being proposed onto the 128?
Thank you, Chair. As you know, at the moment, it's no entry into the old section of Brentwood Road, and as people remember, that is what the Brentwood Road was in times gone past. But yes, they're going to cut that short, and there's going to be a right turn lane and a T-junction into the development, and then the old part of Brentwood Road would then link to that part of the new road into the crematorium. So it is a T-junction with a right turn lane.
Thanks, Julian. So am I right in assuming if you wanted to get access to it, you'd have to take the turning opposite the turning into Baldwin Village, and then at the end of that road where the duck
No,
pond is turned
the
right,
access will be directly off the 128.
off of the main 128, not
Yes.
the old road?
No.
And that's
The
a
old
T-junction.
road will be diverted onto that access road.
Gotcha. So basically, traffic's going to be turning left and right onto what we know is probably the most dangerous road in Thurrock.
I won't say whether it is, I couldn't say whether it is the most dangerous road in Thurrock, but it is a strategic road. They have done their due diligence in modelling. It has been safety audited, and that nothing's come up in the safety audit. And as you're aware, there's now the speed cameras that are on the Brentwood Road. So, but I couldn't say now without going back to see whether the accident record is any better or any worse.
That's fine. Thanks, Julian. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a few questions. I'll ask a couple and then hand over to others, and then I might come back a bit later. So, first of all, I will raise it, the ecologist report in here in relation to the equestrian area. I thought that was a reserved matter. I was surprised to see that as a reason for refusal if the ecologist has given it the green light. Thank you.
It's a different issue. So ecology, the landscape and ecologist has commented on the vegetation and impacts on wildlife, habitats, whereas the issue to do with a wetland sequestration area is to do with the isolation and storage of carbon dioxide.
Okay, thank you. And going on to the next one. So when you read through this report, clearly it's the location that is causing, I think, the council the main concern. When you look at crematoriums in our local area, could you show me the screenshot of where the crematoriums that we have access to in Thurrock are? I think it was your first or second screenshot.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So we can see, yeah, thank you. I can see, so you obviously got Corbet's Tay there, and then obviously you've got the Basildon Crematorium, or the Pitsea Crematorium, as I always thought it was called. And obviously we've got this one here in Thurrock. So ultimately, when you look at those crematoriums, they are offset from town centres, aren't they? So when you look at the report, it says you're not happy that it's in a rural location, but then when you move further into the report, I think it was page 20, you also say, well, actually, you also don't want crematoriums in residential areas, which of course makes sense. So you're always going to get highways issues with crematoriums. If you put them in a residential area, you're going to have trouble. If you're going to have a rural location like Pitsea and Corbet's Tay, you're going to run into trouble. But then I found something else in planning that I've not come across before. I know there's green belt. I know there's the new term grey belt. But I've also come across edge of urban. So this is actually where we want crematoriums. We want crematoriums on the edge of urban areas. Is that correct? Thank you.
In the green belt, generally, with these kinds of applications, we would expect a sequential assessment. So they would come in, and this is to support their argument in saying that this is the only site available. So a sequential assessment will set out whether there's other suitable sites or not. So if there's not any other suitable sites, they can then set out that this is the only site that's available and suitable within a certain catchment area of the crematorium. But they haven't done that. So the only site that we're dealing with here is this site.
Okay, thank you. And then could you take me to the next slide along of where the actual crematorium is? Excellent, that's the one. Yeah, thank you so much. So to me, edge of urban in Thurrock, edge of urban is greenbelt, really. That you wouldn't be able to put a crematorium in a residential area without there being problems with traffic. So realistically, edge of urban is the greenbelt. Now, when I look at Corbet's Tay, which is next to Upminster, or I look at Pitsea, which is off of the A13, and clearly crematoriums do work off of country lanes because those both are off country lanes, Ockenden Road, and there's a bypass going under the A13 or over the A13. To me, I would argue, all right, it's greenbelt. That's edge of urban. I can see an urban area. It's called Baldwin. Now, Baldwin's rural, but as a village, it's an urban area. That's edge of urban, is it not? Thank you.
I wouldn't describe it as edge of urban. It's a rural village, so it's on the edge. It's on the edge of the countryside. Effectively, is behind it is open rural countryside. I wouldn't describe it as urban. But in any event,
well, I wouldn't describe it as urban either. I'm calling it edge of urban.
Yeah.
It's in the report, edge of urban. Really, what I'm trying to highlight here is it's all good and well saying we don't want it in a rural location. We don't want it in a residential area. We want it edge of urban. What is edge of urban? Edge of urban is the green belt. It has to be. All the Thurrock outside of residential areas, general practicality is edge of urban. It's not yourself, it's the MPPF, and it just goes to show how outdated it is. But look, ultimately, and I will move, I see you've raised your hand there, Julian, so I'll come to you next. Ultimately, you've not raised, or I can't see any highways objections. I can see highways concerns, but no highways objections as to where this is. And as for the A128, dangerous road, T-junctions, I accept it's a busy road. We've already moved it down to 50 miles an hour. Funeral processions going up and down that road is only going to slow the traffic down, although they will speed up to, I imagine, 40 to 50 miles an hour when they're on that road. Have you got any, you don't have any, where's your objections in this scheme as a reason for refusal? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. I would point out that Corbett Day is on a bus route and right on the edge of the urban area of Corbett Day. Pitsea is also within the residential, just off the residential area on a bus route from the edge of Pitsea. They're not as rural as this event. In terms of the rural aspect, from a highways traffic modelling point of view, we can't take that into account. What we're looking at is what is the traffic impact of this development? And from what we can see in terms of the traffic impact, it's not severe enough for us to give a reason for refusal. But we have also raised concerns because of the area itself being very rural. In terms of accessibility, there's no chance of walking there, there's no chance of getting a bus there, there's no chance of getting other facility to get there. Whereas the two other sites that you've mentioned, there are. In fact, there are bus stops in close location to both sets of those sites. So in terms of this, our concerns still remain because of the accessibility of the site to all users, not just to driving.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I'll be honest with you, look, I accept your opinion there, but I think you're putting a lot of emphasis on a bus stop. It's not near. Like, when we build these things, we get this all the time, you want it near a train station, you want it near public transport, and really what you're coming up there with me is a bus stop. We've got a bus stop near Pitsea, we've got a bus stop near Corbett's Tay. I don't know the bus routes in this area. I can't tell you whether there is one there. I mean, obviously there's one in Baldwin. Look, I appreciate that is far off, but I think...
Councillor, if I can just bring this to a bit of a premature close. I think the question you asked was what makes this different from the similarly situated crematoria, and I believe Julian has answered that question. Any other questions for Richard? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you very much. Right, so in the report also it says, look, Thurrock doesn't need a crematorium. We have to acknowledge that Thurrock does not have a crematorium. When we look at the local crematoriums in the area, and we have sought their advice on this, I'm always nervous when we speak to competitors as to whether they should have a competitor in a local area. We had this issue, Chair, with Lidl's a few months ago when we approved Lidl in the Greenbelt in Tilbury. And when you read through the report, Asda's and Tesco's were kicking off. And they were having a go at Lidl. Well, why are they getting involved? Well, they're getting involved because they've got a vested interest. So when we talk to crematoriums in the area, I would always take a pinch of salt with what they're saying. But the question, thank you, I know you're after one, I think they've given away the game, the competitors, because they're saying they're 113% capacity, 87% capacity, and 93% capacity. That's getting very close to overcapacity. So we're not concerned at those numbers at this point in time that Thurrock has got enough use of crematorium, even though we don't have a crematorium and we're looking at those figures. Thank you.
Richard.
Yeah, I think I've responded to that in the report, is that the figures that the applicants have provided are for full, every type of cremation, which is indirect and direct cremations, whereas the owners of the Basildon facility have written in to confirm that they haven't distinguished between direct and indirect cremations. So direct cremations have no attended service, so therefore they've confirmed that the figures shown are significantly under what actually, in terms of the capacity, they're operating significantly under capacity. So that's the owners of the Basildon facility.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other questions for Richard? Okay, so let's move on to the debate. Who would like to start? Councillor Lydiard.
Yeah, personally, I think there's some serious problems with the access to the properties. I think there's damage to the green belt, and although I'm in favour of crematorium somewhere in Thurrock, this is definitely the wrong place for me. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, I think, Steve, you were first, then Councillor Byrne, then Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Chair. So some of you will have heard this before, but I'll repeat it for the benefit of anybody that hasn't. So the Metropolitan Greenbelt was designed to be approximately 25 to 35 miles wide, all the way around London. And the narrowest part of the Greenbelt is between Cranham, in fact, where the other crematorium, one of the crematorium are, and now you're talking about Langdon Hills. So that distance is down to about 5 miles, 4 to 5 miles, and this is smack bang in the middle of it. So what we're going to do is take the narrowest part of the Greenbelt and then we're going to start developing it. So I'm dead against it on that principle. The fact that I agree with Councillor Lydiard, it's in completely the wrong location. As the planner has kindly mentioned, there isn't an established need at this moment in time. Julian's view of the road is perhaps slightly different to mine because I use it every day. And I would still argue that it's a very dangerous road. There's frequently very close shaves, even though it's improved it, taking it down to 50 mile an hour, but 50 mile an hour going in opposite directions is 100 mile an hour impact speed. So you ain't going to get out of that alive. There's, as also been pointed out by Julian, there's no access, there's no paths, there's no cycleways. The nearest thing I can think of to there is a bridle way, but I don't suppose too many people are going to be using that to go to the funeral. The point I was making earlier when I spoke to the agent was there's been a previous application. So this, for me, is somebody trying to develop the Greenbelt. So arable land's about £11,000 an acre. If you can get development in principle, which is what they're asking for, so we have no idea what they're going to put on it ultimately if it's granted, that's worth somewhere between £750,000 and £1 million an acre. And I think that's the root of this. It's the wrong location by a country mile. And it's scrubland, it's not very pretty, I agree with all that, but the bottom line is it's a green space, and it's one of the last bits of green space left. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve.
In the green belt. Otherwise, we don't have a green belt anymore. That's my point.
Sorry, Chad, only
No,
talking
sorry,
about
gentlemen.
the last bit of green space available in Thurrock. Come on.
No, I didn't say that. Thanks, Chair.
You will have your turn, Councillor Kelly, after Councillor Byrne. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak?
Yeah, cool. Get the gloves out. For me, I mean, I'd love to be taken off to Upminster. It's a nice little country ride, isn't it? Or I'd take my loved ones down the most dangerous road in Thurrock. He's not floating it for me. Greenbelt makes me say no. Lack of any information on carbon makes me say no. Offsetting 400 kilos of carbon, offsetting it somewhere in Doncaster is not floating my boat either. It doesn't cut it. And so we haven't got a crematorium. We haven't got a hospital. We haven't even got a train station where I live. So, I mean, because we haven't got it, it don't mean you just put one there, does it? We're quite adequately served with Upminster. We're served, and this is in principle, isn't it? Could be anything. As Steve said, this is planning. If there's definitely this or definitely that, but for me, it could be anything. So it's, yeah, one was rejected, so let's try another one. If this one's rejected, what's the next one going to be? Zoo or, I don't know, anything. So.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair there. So, I mean, first of all, if it was an agreement in principle, it has to be what we've agreed. They can't just come back and well, they can come back for something else. But if we agree a crematorium, it has to be a crematorium. Look, I'm not sure if the appetite's here for this evening, but in my view, I think this is obviously a fantastic opportunity. I do think that Thurrock does need a crematorium. I've raised there that the crematoriums in the local area are already at full capacity. I do think that they do need to be in rural locations. I do not think it's fair that the more urban areas have to take, all these types of developments. I do like this equestrian area. I think it's good. It's an attempt to offset. And I just think that we need to be very careful. Maybe this is unfair. I can guess the future. I do wonder whether they will now go away and come back with another type of development, whether it would be housing. And as I mentioned earlier on, and we're about to find out the next application, we have a new government in now, okay, non-political and planning, but they've clearly stated that they want more homes. And if you come to us for more homes in the Greenbelt, 50% affordable, you will look favourably upon. And that is what we could be looking on this site in the very near future. So I think what we're looking at here is a lot better than what might be coming down the line. But I don't know that. That may be unfair, but we've also got to make those judgments.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll take that. We'll take that point. Obviously, we're talking about what's in front of us now, not what might be coming down the future. Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm with Steve and Councillor Byrne on this. I appreciate Councillor Kelly's comments, but it is what we are looking at now. Whether they buy it, they sell it, whatever they do with it, it's this application now as it stands. It's in the wrong place. It's totally wrong for me. I'll be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors wish to speak? Okay, so before we move on to the vote, if I can attempt to summarise. So there are a number of reasons that have been given for refusal of this application. One of them is the lack of perception by the officers that there isn't a need, because that need is adequately covered by at least two of the crematoriums in the wider area. Secondly, it's being refused on the grounds of accessibility. Some of the points that are being made are around safety, particularly around the junction with the A128, and around the limited ways in which people would be able to use this crematorium, limited ways in which they would be able to access it, sorry. And thirdly, on sustainability grounds, as the officer has mentioned, there is insufficient information to build a particularly good picture about how well this sequestration area would actually achieve zero carbon emissions. That said, as Councillor Kelly points out, if you believe, well, there are two things I suppose you need to think about. One, do you believe there is a good argument, a strong argument for a facility like this in this borough? And secondly, if you do you think it should be here? Seems to me that those are the 2 points which are under consideration. So, with your permission, I'll go to the recommendation. And the recommendation is to refuse planning permission. May I have, do we have a proposer and seconder? May I have a proposer for that? Thank you, Councillor Lilliard. And a seconder? Councillor Byrne. May I ask you to show those in favour of the recommendation? I'm abstaining. Those against? And one abstention. Okay, thank you. So the recommendation to refuse planning permission has been carried. Thank you. Just checking before we go on to the next one, do people want a quick comfort break? I thought you might. 5 minutes enough? Just our second item, and we have another 3 to go. Sorry, first, 4 to go. Apologies, I forgot September. So, motion moved. Lovely, thank you. So the next item, item 6, is land west of Park Lane. Please note, councillors, there's an addendum report for this item, which I think we were handed before the meeting. Can I ask Lucy Mannion to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for outline planning permission with all matters reserved except for access for residential development of up to 90 dwellings, including vehicular access, parking, open space, attenuation and infrastructure works. The site, this is a site location plan. The site area is 2.77 hectares and comprises unkempt grassland, which is grazed by horses, fenced paddocks and stable buildings with areas of hard standing. The site is within low risk flood zone 1 and the site is within Greenbelt. So this is an aerial photo of the site, and the site is central, so it is here. So the site's immediately north and east of the existing developed area of Aveley. The site is bordered by Ormiston Park Academy, which is here to the north. Aveley Football Club is to the east, which is here, and Bellis Park, which is a grade 2 registered park and garden and golf course, is to the north and east of the site. So it starts basically adjacent to the site. So this slide, I put this in just to show the site in the wider context. So it is, again, pretty centrally. So it is here. This is the proposed master plan layout of the development within the site. As an outline application, the plan shows the locations of housing, which is these here, and open spaces, although the detailed plans would be assessed at reserve matters stage should the application be approved. So this is a parameter plan, access and movement around the site. The vehicle access would be from Park Lane, and it's shown by this grey arrow. So as part of the application, the applicant has committed to adding a toucan crossing to Lance Corporal Nicky Mason Way for greater pedestrian accessibility to the site. So that is, that is where this pink circle is. This slide just shows the more detailed of the access, so the technical parts. Next on to some photos. So this is the site viewed facing northwest from Lance Corporal Nicky Mason Way. So the site must have been looks quite dry there. So it's to the background of the photo with Ormiston Park Academy to the very far background. So this photo shows the site facing west from Lance Corporal Nicky Mason Way. The housing opposite is to the left of the photo, with the site to the right. So this is fairly recent housing development, which is opposite the site. This is the site viewed facing south from Park Lane. So the proposed access is here, and then you can see the development in the background. And this is the site viewed facing northwest from the junction of Bellhouse Avenue and Lance Corporal Nicky Mason Way. So the site is here. Okay, so as said before, the site is within Greenbelt and would not fall within one of the exceptions to inappropriate development as set out in the MPPF and local policies. Therefore, it would result in inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. The applicant has advanced circumstances that would amount to very special circumstances that overcome the presumption against this type of proposal. The factors towards VSC, very special circumstances, apologies, were put forward, and these are assessed from paragraph 6.2 onwards within the planning report. The balancing exercise is summarised in paragraphs 6.41 and 2. It's considered that significant weight can be attributed towards the site being landlocked by existing development to the east, south, west, and partly to the north, with the school playing fields being protected by their location within the boundary of Bellis Park, which is, as I said before, a listed park. It's considered that very substantial weight should be attached to the benefits of providing housing, including 40% affordable housing as a factor towards very special circumstances. The provision of self or custom-build plots, utilisation of a sustainable site, economic benefits and environmental benefits are all considered to have some weight towards the very special circumstances balance. So it's concluded that the benefits of the proposal clearly outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt and any other harms. Therefore, on this occasion, on balance, a departure from normal Greenbelt policies is justified. And then the application summary is development is inappropriate development within the Greenbelt, but the factors put forward amount to very special circumstances which outweigh the harm of the proposal. There are no objections to the proposals on grounds of amenity, heritage or highways with appropriate conditions. So to conclude, the recommendation is to approve the application for the reasons as set out in paragraph 7.1 to 7.4 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Lucy. You will have the opportunity to ask Lucy questions in a couple of minutes, but we have received a statement of support and a couple of statements of objection. So a statement of support has been received from Pierre Farnsworth. It can be found on pages 7 to 8 of the speaker's booklet. Pierre, if you'd like to come down and join us. Which one of you is Pierre and which one's Farnsworth? Pierre, you just have to press the right-hand button to activate your microphone. You'll have 3 minutes from when the clock comes up on the screen.
Good evening, Chairman and members. My name is Pierre Farnsworth and I'm a director at Scott Properties. Next to me is our planning consultant, Kieran Wheeler from Savills. I'd like to thank the case officer for the thorough report and presentation and for engaging positively throughout the application process. We started work on this project in 2021 and following completion of technical studies, we sought pre-application advice from officers in 2023. After updating the proposals in line with the pre-app advice, we then carried out a public consultation exercise with local residents. which resulted in further changes. The application was submitted in December 2023. A number of additional amendments have been made to the proposal since submission to respond to further feedback from technical consultees. These address the additional requirements in respect of highways, drainage, heritage and ecology. We've engaged positively with the officers and consultees throughout to ensure that the application comes to this committee with no technical objections and with the recommendation for approval. It is acknowledged the site forms part of the Greenbelt. However, the location and enclosed nature of the site assist in ensuring that the potential impacts on openness and the Greenbelt purposes are limited. The scheme will deliver a number of significant planning benefits. As such, your officers have concluded that very special circumstances exist in support of the proposal and the grant of planning permission. The Section 106 agreement has an agreed set of heads of terms and will secure the requested obligations as detailed in the officer's report. We'd like to highlight the following benefits of the proposal. The delivery of up to 90 new homes in a sustainable location, which will make a meaningful contribution towards the district's delivery of new homes. Up to 36 affordable homes, providing 5% above policy, and 4 self- and custom-built plots to address local needs. Areas of new publicly accessible open space, including children's play space, improved pedestrian and cycle connectivity. Off-site highways works, including new Toucan crossing across the B1335, economic, social and environmental benefits in the form of job creation and support for local businesses. Whilst this application is in outline form, we believe that the proposals meet the high standards expected by the Council. The agreed framework plans provide a sound basis from which the detailed design can be developed through a future reserve matters application. As set out in the officer's report, the application represents sustainable development with clear benefits, and we hope that you will endorse the recommendation with your approval today. Kieran and I would be very happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Byrne, then Councillor Maney.
I think I always ask this question. 36 affordable homes. What value is are these affordable homes going to be in terms of purchase price?
So, in respect of affordable homes, in the committee report supplied, the tenure was put forward as a 50-50 split, so 50% shared ownership, 50% affordable rent. We, as the landowner, we would propose or would like to discuss with the officers the ability to offer them to local residents first on a cascade mechanism, which is something that we'd like to discuss further. But the affordable rent will be by the rent caps that are in place, and then shared ownership will be a percentage of the market.
Not an answer then. Okay, fair enough.
Sorry, Councillor Byrne, can you be a bit more specific in what you were looking for? Sorry, I couldn't hear you there.
Okay, sorry. I asked how much are these affordable houses going to be sold for, and all I get back is a 50-50 split. Is that 50-50 split of £1 or 50-50 split of 500,000? Affordable, we've got to make sure it is affordable and not £1 million house affordable, which makes it 900,000, which is not affordable. So I ask the same question every time. I never get an answer, so I'm not expecting one this time.
Mr. Farnsworth, would you care to answer or to explain how that might work?
So affordable rent is dictated by the cap that's in place within the district. So that will be the rented element, which is 50% of the 36 homes. And then shared ownership will be a percentage of the market rate. Yeah. I mean, I haven't got £1 per square foot of the resale.
Carry on. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So you can give us the principle, but you wouldn't be able to give us a guideline figure, is what you're saying?
I couldn't give you a guideline figure, no, sir, no.
Thank you. Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Chair. Hello. What evidence have you got that this is previously developed land?
It's previously part landfill, this site. It is.
It is?
I see one or two surprised faces. Perhaps we can bring Lucy in on this?
Yeah, it's clearly stated in the report that it's not previously developed land, so no one's saying it's previously developed land.
That it was previously developed land somewhere in there.
If it is in there, it shouldn't be, but in part 6.5. So yeah, as PS said, it was formerly quarry, then landfill, and that doesn't constitute previous developed land. So all it says is there are some small kind of stable paddock buildings on the site which could count towards previous developed land, but they're so small that it's not, as a site, we would not count it as previous developed.
So thanks, Lucy, but the applicant has said it is previously developed land.
No, sorry, for clarity, it's not our case that it's previously developed land. We accept and acknowledge that it's inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. There are, as Lucy's outlined, there are, excuse me, a number of buildings that are used for horses, but that is it on site. There was previously, it was used for landfill. That now has been capped over, so that's the case in the sense that there aren't any other previously developed elements on the site now.
So it's a good question. So we can agree that this is not previously developed land.
Agreed.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions for? Oh, yes. Sorry,
Chair. Why is it not a mix of houses and flats? Why is it? What?
To you, Chair. At the moment, it's in outline, so we haven't designed the detailed layout. There will inevitably be a mix of flats and houses that come forward. At the moment, it's an up to 90 units figure. So once the sites are brought forward in reserved matters stage, we'll have a detailed mix. But by virtue of the parameter plans that we've set, heights and density, it inevitably will be a mix of houses and a small amount of flats.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions for Pierre? Councillor Kelly.
It was just a quick one. Obviously, we've had a lot of updates from the new government in relation to what they expect when it comes to housing in the Greenbelt in the UK. One of their golden rules was they almost suggested, look, you want to build in the Greenbelt, you need to come to us with our target, which is 50% affordable. You've come in at 40%. Obviously, this evening we can approve it, we can reject it. If it goes to rejection, it will then go to appeal. When you go to appeal, you won't be hitting one of their golden targets. So any particular reason why you didn't come to us at 50% when it was clearly indicated, look, if you come to us with 50, you're looking good?
Thank you. Good question. The application was submitted 12 months ago. We didn't have the MPPF reforms on the table at that point in time. We took the decision to basically exceed your policies at 40% because we felt that that was a strong benefit for the scheme. As you suggest, if we end up at appeal, then that MPPF reform may be in place. It may change. We don't have any certainty on that at this point in time.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I would have thought a couple of months would have been enough to have a little tweak, but yeah, I also accept that you might also want to take the risk at 40. So, all right, no, thank you.
As I become a bit of a broken record, but as I do say quite a lot, we know what may be coming down the line, but we're looking at what is now. And thanks for that explanation, gents. Sorry, gents, I wouldn't leave too quickly. Councillor Maney, you have another question.
Yeah, we're not done yet. Sorry. You've said that it's with a short walk or within walking distance to shops, and the nearest shop is a half a mile away. It's not close proximity, is it? Half a mile away. I wouldn't have said anyway.
I think it's within easy walking distance. 800 metres to a range of facilities is a perfectly acceptable distance to walk or cycle, in my view.
Not for the less able-bodied, but we'll agree to differ on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Okay, then, gentlemen, I think you can probably leave your seats without fear of there being another question coming flying at you. Thank you. Now, we have received a statement of objection from Paul Matthews. That can be found on pages 8 to 9 of your speaker's booklet. Mr. Matthews, if you would like to join us. Or maybe not. Yeah, there's the statement has been circulated in Mr. Matthews' absence. I will suggest that we move on to the next statement. A statement of objection has been received from Ward Councillor Cathy Sisterson. Councillor, would you like to come forward and read your statement?
Right, thank you, Chair. There's several reasons why this development is inappropriate in this location. Firstly, as we've said, it's on greenbelt land. It's not previously developed land. There's nothing grey about it. It's greenbelt land used to graze and stable horses. I understand that we've got a severe housing shortage and we will have to make difficult decisions. But as the Chair said, we're looking at as how things stand, and quoting from the officer's report, unmet housing need on its own is highly unlikely to amount to very special circumstances required to outweigh the greenbelt harm. I'd also like to talk about local issues and pressure on our services. Aveley Medical Centre has got 4,658 patients per GP, compared to a Thurrock average of 3,431 and a national average of 2,294. It was even mentioned in Parliament yesterday, so it is severe pressure on that service. Aveley and Kennington's primary schools are both oversubscribed. They've each got a capacity of 420 pupils. Projected figures for next year, 447 for Aveley and 479 for Kennington's. There's children in Aveley already having to go to Purfleet Primary because there's not room locally, which is at least a mile and a half away. We've got a proposed new school, but that's been a building site since 2021, and there's no news as far as I know on when that might be, even started building work on. I'd also like to talk about the current use of the site, which is the keeping of horses. These belong to local people who are here today, and they're valued by the many residents who come to visit them. And we used to have stables all around Aveley. We used to have a lovely donkey field, all of which has been lost to developers, and we don't want to lose everything. There's other aspects which have made me quite angry as well. They're proposing a toucan crossing for residents to cross Lance Corporal Nicky Mason Way. Now that road, where that's crossed quite regularly, there's a convenient crossing point that school children use and other residents use. There's no crossing there, but it's used all the same on a busy bypass. When I brought up the possibility of a crossing being put there, and I was told it wasn't feasible because of the nature of the road being a bypass, but now developers are bringing up, and they seem suddenly it's not just possible, but it's desirable, it seems. The mitigation, the environmental mitigation, is suggesting as a 106 donation to Thames Chase. That's good, but Thames Chase is in Upminster. It's doing nothing for people of Aveley. There's existing residents who live opposite, whose houses are very poorly shielded from the busy bypass, and I feel mitigation would be better served if it was shielding them better rather than in Upminster. So, yeah, they're those reasons I'd like to give, and I don't think they outdo the harm to the Greenbelt. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Members, do you have any questions for Councillor Sisterson? No? Now, genuinely no? She can get up then. Yes. Thank you very much, Councillor. Okay, so we can go back to Lucy's presentation, and I would like to just check if you have any questions for Lucy before we go to the debate. So, any questions, Councillor Polston?
Thank you. It might not be to Lucy, maybe Julian, but if we say that there were to be up to 90 properties and we run with, on the hypothesis that there are 90, and we assume that most properties would have multiple vehicles, the roundabout on Lance Corporal Nicky Mason Way, is that suitable for the volume of traffic projected at that rate, if we assume that to be the figure?
Thank you, Chair. Both that roundabout and the junction coming out the Development Park Lane have been assessed and modelled, and at the moment, both the current roundabout is well under capacity, and bear in mind, I think people think because it's 90 properties, you're going to get 180 vehicles all come out at the same time. That's not quite how it works. People, you know, the natural way things work in terms of traffic, people come out at different times of the day, come out at the things. But I think even if you put 180 extra vehicles on that roundabout, it would quite easily cope with it, that in terms of capacity.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly?
Thank you, Chair. So the first question is, normally I was surprised to see this officer recommendation for approval, given that it is in the Greenbelt, and over the last few years we've had plenty of applications in the Greenbelt in Thurrock, big housing applications, and almost all of them have been for refusal. I remember East Tilbury probably about 18 months to 2 years ago, that was in the Greenbelt. But it was next to a train station, accessible, 100% affordable housing, and that was up for refusal. All of a sudden, we're looking at Greenbelt applications in the Greenbelt that are now for approval. So I just wondered, has any, I know the MPF is going through a change at the moment, but has guidance changed? Are we a bit more panicky now? It's probably more for yourself, Mr. Barnes. Why is this approved when over the last couple of years, everything's been refusal? What makes this one different? Is it on its own merits, or are you under a bit more pressure?
So the question is, what makes this one different from the others?
Well, yeah, pretty much, and it's quite serious. Why all of a sudden is this up for approval? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I think that's all articulated in the officer report. In terms of what's changing and with reference to the MPPF, I mean, that's to be given limited weight at this point. That's a consultation that's concluded. But officers have made clear the reasons in the report, you know, the position of the council and how that's all been weighed, and the addendum makes clear how the assessment of VSC has been undertaken. So I think that's all clear in the report and in the officer presentation.
Okay, thank you. And one more.
Certainly, Councillor.
Thank you. When we approved the primary school, again, this was probably a couple of years ago, one of the arguments, now again in Greenbelt, one of the arguments was, look, Averley's expanding, it needs these school places. Now, for whatever reason, that's not gone ahead. Obviously, that is, and respectfully, the councillors have raised concerns. No concerns then about this overcapacity issue at this present time, because one of the reasons we wanted to approve that was precisely because of oversubscription. And here we are a couple of years later, and now, look, that's not our fault that we're in that situation. But
okay, let's let Lucy answer that question.
Okay, so in the proposed section 106, which is right at the end of the, so in 7.2, sorry, 8.1. So there would be contributions at primary level, and should the application be approved, there'd be primary and nursery contributions. There's no need, there's plenty of capacity at secondary level. So this would be a significant amount of money, but we can't unfortunately give you that figure at now because it's an outline application, so we don't know the number of bedrooms, but that would be a lot towards education, and yeah, that's been addressed within the report and the mitigation.
Councillor, do you want to come back on that one?
No, I'll tell you what, I'll come back in a couple of minutes maybe.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think it's Councillor Maney next, then Councillor Byrne, and then Steve.
Thanks, Chair. I don't know if this is a question for Lucy or the council's urban design officer. He objected on two fairly strong grounds. One was the piecemeal unplanned development in Greenbelt and erosion of the settlement edge. And the other was the poor accessibility and the cut-off due to the Aveley boundary south of the bypass. So I guess my question is, why is one part of the planning service raising clear objections, but the recommendation is for approval?
Okay, so yeah, they are the comments, as you say, of the urban design officer, which in terms of the piecemeal development comment, there's nothing that we can do at the moment because the new local plan is delayed, so we haven't got that. So the comment towards piecemeal development was, in an ideal world, we had an up-to-date plan which would have sites set out. So that refers to that. And in terms of poor accessibility, the applicant is adding a toucan crossing. And again, I suppose it's their kind of, I don't know the best way to put it, they're thinking from an ideal world scenario rather than we have to, as development management planning officers, look at it kind of practically and within the policy.
Thanks, Lucy. Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Byrne next.
Yes, as I said in the first one, and you said a significant amount of money, have we got the 106 carrot swaying it again? It seems to be we go yes when there's a bit of 106 money or a bit of school coming into it or a hospital, and then we seem to forget about the green belt.
Sorry, Councillor, is there a question in there?
Yeah, does the carrot of 106 money sway us building on the green belt?
Thank you.
No, it doesn't. So we've set out the mitigation, but it is the planning balance by which the recommendation was achieved.
So why did you mention a significant amount of money? That wasn't need to be mentioned then, was it?
Well, that's as part of the mitigation towards education, which was the question that Councillor Kelly specifically raised.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Councillor. I'll come back to you in a minute, Councillor Maney, but I think Steve's next.
Thanks, Chair. I've kind of looked at, and I've always struggled a bit with this, what's called a balanced assessment, but I'm somewhat more concerned with this one. So when it talks about provision of self-stroke custom-build plots, some weight, why? What? I don't understand why that adds weight because they're self-build plots. Am I missing something? Probably.
So central government guidance within the NPPF requires councils to provide custom self-build plots. We have had a site approved in the past, but that was never started. And I'm not sure, there is one other site, but we haven't got those custom build plots. So it is something that we should be providing, and we have to report the number of plots and people on our register to central government.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. I recall there were some of those were up at Vange, or Vange by the Five Bells roundabout there, but I think you're right, that never carried on. So I'm going to ask exactly the same question again. The economic benefits, I don't know, what does that, are you talking about the section 106 there, or are we talking about something else? When it's on page 77 where it talks about economic benefits and some weight again. So I just want to understand what that weight is that offsets the greenbelt, the fact that it's. And to be fair, I'm going to ask the same question about the next one as well.
So the economic developments are relating, benefits, sorry, are relating to the provision of the Toucan crossing. There's also a car club, which is, I think we've spoken about it at committee before, haven't we, the new car club. So car club contribution, the contribution towards Bellis Park, which is, so there's Bellis Park Conservation Management Plan, which has been or is soon to be adopted by the council, and I think it might be a good time to a point that Councillor Sisterson raised about that contribution, the Bellis Park Conservation Management Plan contribution. It's going to an organisation called Thames Park because they're the ones who coordinated the Conservation Management Plan, but it will be used on Bellis Park. So there's no, it's not going kind of out of the borough or out of the area. That contribution is specifically for Bellis Park. Yeah.
So thanks, Lucy. You're helping me here, although I have to say I'm struggling why these things have some weight against the loss of the greenbelt, but never mind. So the environmental benefits, can you tell me what that constitutes as?
So it would be the mitigation measures, which unfortunately with outline applications we can't confirm exactly what these are until we have the full detail in the reserve matters.
Okay, thanks, Lucy, because it just makes me think that they're almost there as also RANs, and exactly as you just said, we can't even identify what that might be yet. So when I then look at that, and I know it's supposed to be a balancing act, but when I look at that, there's kind of three things there that I'm struggling to see that there's any weight in, whilst we give up another lump of the greenbelt. That was the point I was trying to get at, but thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Councillor Maney, I think you wanted to come back in.
Thanks, Chair. The majority of the pavements in Lance Corporal Nicky Mason Way are adopted, are they not?
Yeah, Julian, do you want to confirm?
So
is that highway adopted?
Right, okay. So Lance Corporal Nicky Mason Way is adopted, yes.
Okay. It's the only offering to me is the Toucan crossing, really, isn't it? That's really the only offering we're getting, which will link the Persimmon estate.
Do you mind putting that as a question, Councillor?
Yes, okay. No, I don't. The highway, you've answered my question about the highway. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Any further questions? So then I'd like to move on to the debate. So I would like to see who would like to speak first. Councillor Byrne.
Shall I start? Oh. This is what I love being on this committee, and this is why it makes it so confusing for all that. Item 1, we've got the councillor that puts out reasons to build on the greenbelt. The second one, the same councillor comes up with reasons not to build on the greenbelt. And the officers say, don't build on it because it's greenbelt. Now this time, the same officers are saying, build on the greenbelt, it's okay. So, but not, you can't build on a two-room cottage. So it does make it hard for all of us to think, what do we do? Where do we go? How do we vote? And I'll just throw that in. I say, I might be mad, but I love it because of that. So thank you.
Do you have a feeling on which way you would
yes,
would you like to tell us about sort of what your view is on this particular
yes,
application? Sorry, that was it. Okay, thank you. Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Chair. The recent paperwork we've had, the addendum, describes the site as landlocked, but almost all of the northern boundary adjoins Ormiston Park, the playing field there, which is open greenbelt. So it's not landlocked, is it?
Lucy, would you like to comment on that one?
Thank you. So it's, what you said, but the playing fields for Ormiston Park Academy are within the boundary of Bellis Park, which is a Grade 2 listed park and garden. So this couldn't be built on. So it's not going to allow, should this development be granted, it's not going to allow any more sprawl into the green belt. So that is the kind of uniqueness of this site.
Sorry, just for clarification, Lucy, are we saying that therefore it couldn't be expanded? What we're looking at here couldn't be expanded?
Yes, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
Okay, next, please. Anybody else wishing to comment? Councillor Polston.
Yeah, I'll be quite honest, I don't know which way I'm going to go on this yet. Can I just ask, maybe to Ash or Lucy, if this is an outline application and the recommendation is to delegate the authority to the Chief Planning Officer, does that mean it doesn't come back to committee after this at any point? Or if once all of the details are ironed out, will it come back at a later stage? Just because I think that might help me decide.
Ashley?
Yeah, sure. So the reserve matters can come back, and we can ensure that. So because it's departure, we have to refer it to the Secretary of State. So that's what we're delegating authority for there. But yeah, when RM's submitted, we can bring that back.
But I would guess that once we've given outline permission, even though it's gone to the Secretary of State, assuming the Secretary agrees with us, we can't withdraw that. That's it. That's one and done.
Yeah, correct. So if committee were minded to approve in line with officer recommendation, the principle is agreed. It's then for Secretary of State to make that final decision. But yeah, we can't then go back.
So this is an outline for up to 90, so that essentially means that if the Secretary of State says yes, then at no later stage will we come back to decide anything to do with the properties or the number of properties?
Yeah, so the actual details, the reserve matters, that can come back to committee, yeah.
Hope that clarifies things a bit, Councillor. Any further comments? Any further? Oh, Councillor Lydiard.
Thanks, Chair. It seems to me that because we're so very short of affordable housing in the area, that we are prepared to use our green belt. And as I'm actually in favour of producing as much affordable housing as we possibly can, I shall be voting in favour.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Kelly?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And of course, it is a difficult one, this, because ultimately I do think the professional officer's opinion is that it is approved. And if it goes to appeal, I do think that realistically there is a good chance that this gets approved anyhow. I think what's ever so slightly worrying is I do think something's changed here. We have always, over the last few years, inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, substantial. Reduction of openness in the Greenbelt, substantial. Lack of 5-year housing supply, a very substantial weight in favour of. That's always been the case, yet there have always been rejections. So there's certainly a mood change. And I think what's worrying about that is, again, I'll bring East Tilbury into it, that was 100% affordable. So I thought the sacrifice is there. Now what we're looking at is developments in the Greenbelt that are only really 40%. So really tough, probably looking for some guidance from yourself to see where you're going, maybe, because I just generally think it's one of them. We can reject it, clearly reasons for rejection, but would we lose on appeal? So yeah, over to yourself and others. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. First point I would make is that whether or not we might win this on appeal, I know it's, responsibly we should take it into account, but I believe we should vote the way we think is correct, and then we can concern ourselves about how we back up that decision if it goes against the officers. Personally, I'm very much like yourself. I'm afraid I'm not going to give you any more clarity than you gave yourself. I am not convinced, personally. The reason I'm not convinced is I don't feel that. I think we, as a committee, have made it clear that the lack of housing within Thurrock of itself is not a convincing reason to build in location X. It's a convincing reason to build more houses, but that doesn't mean we just plonk them anywhere. I have concerns with this particular location, I suppose partly in terms of the area we're looking at. We've had 340 houses built there in the last couple of years. This will effectively, my apologies for using emotive terms, blot out the last bit of open space along that section of road. And for me, there have to be quite convincing reasons to want to do that. I am not yet convinced, personally. So I would find it very difficult to vote for this recommendation as it stands with the information I have in front of me. Councillor Byrne.
Sorry, just a thought. If this does go to appeal and it's at 40%, have we got a chance of getting another 10% out of it? So if it goes to appeal, could we get 50? Is that, have we got to play the odds of getting an extra 10% affordable housing?
I believe it's an appeal process, not a negotiation process. So I think if it came back, it would come back as it's gone out. Lucy, please feel free to put me right on that.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. I just wanted to respond to some of the points that you raised, and saying that lack of housing on its own doesn't kind of trump Greenbelt. That is 100% correct, and as we've seen fairly recently at committee, the airfield site and the East Tilbury. But what we've tried to make clear in the report is that this site, yes, it is Greenbelt, but in terms of how it affects the 5 purposes, so the purposes within the MPPF of why a site is within Greenbelt, and that adds very, very strongly to the balance, because if this site is developed, it doesn't set any kind of precedent because it is landlocked, albeit on one side by a park rather than built form. So that was that. And 340 houses, so I know it as the Aveley bypass site. I don't know if it's got a kind of better, proper name. So the 340 houses there, they've been around a lot longer than a couple of years. So I think so. It was approved in 2009. So that development, I mean, it's been completed for quite a while now. And the comment from Councillor Byrne about this 50% affordable housing, just reiterate again that this is within a document that's just been consulted on. It's by no means an actual policy, so we can't give that any weight at the moment, and our affordable housing to be policy compliant with our policies that are in place at the moment is 35%. So just to bear that in mind.
Thanks, Lucy. That's helpful clarification. Okay, Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So yeah, I just really want to add a point, and it's clear as day there, and it's one of the reasons why I've always been open to developments in rural areas, and it's an important point. What the officer just said there, and that is what the MPPF says. It says it's perfectly fine to build in Greenbelt in urban areas, and it's the urban areas that take all the housing, And as we've seen, pressure on the primary schools, pressure on this and that. And then when it comes to rural area, oh no, oh, it's the green belt, oh, it affects the NPPF. That is a problem with the NPPF, because ultimately that is why we're getting urban sprawl. And I don't agree with it, and that's why I was trying to make the point earlier on. But yeah, look, it is what it is. And I do accept the point, though, that it is slightly enclosed. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Unfortunately, we only have the NPPF that we have, but that doesn't restrict our ability to agree or disagree. Councillor Maney.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't like the application at all. I think it's a very poor application, and to be perfectly honest, I think it's been done with maximum gain for the applicant, with no thought for the fact that it's totally not in keeping with Averley at all. The primary schools, aside of this, the primary schools are bursting at the seams. The children are rammed in like sardines. You ring the doctors, you're on hold an hour, you can't get through, you get cut off and it starts all over again. We do not have the facilities for another huge housing estate at all. The fact that it's in the green belt and this flip-flopping, we can, we can't, we should, we shouldn't, build on the green belt, nothing is particularly clear. I appreciate your answer, Lucy, about the urban design officer, but the fact that he objected on two very strong grounds doesn't sit at all right with me. I'm just very concerned about the intention, the place it's intended to go. I don't think it's right at all. And it's just not in keeping with Averley. This high density ramming everything in is more suited to a town. Averley doesn't have a train station. You know, this really application is really for the applicant and not for the residents of Averley and not for the good of or the betterment of Averley. And I will absolutely not be voting for it.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any more comments, or will we move to the vote? I suggest we move to the vote then. Thank you. So the recommendation is to delegate authority to the Chief Planning Officer to grant planning permission subject to the following: referral to the Secretary of State under the terms of the Town and Country Planning Consultation England Direction 2021, and subject to the application not being called in by the Secretary of State for determination, grant planning permission subject to the conditions and S106 legal agreement requirements as set out in this report. So, do I have a proposer for this motion? Councillor Lydiard. Do I have a seconder? Okay. For want of a seconder, I would just like to bring Ashley in here, because obviously, for want of a seconder, we can't proceed with that vote. Okay, do we have an alternative motion, folks? We can't progress with the recommendation as set down here, so we need an alternative motion to be proposed and seconded so we can vote on it. Councillor Maney.
I want to reject it based on the fact that it's in the green belt. Yeah, inappropriate development.
So proposal to reject?
Yeah.
Do we have a seconder for that proposal? Yeah. Councillor Byrne. Ashley.
Okay, so we'll need from members then clarity on the reasons. So you've, from what I've heard, you've referenced inappropriate development in the green belt, which has already been acknowledged within the report. So we're going to need a bit more from members in order for your reasons for refusal. So you can expand upon that.
Well, the reduction of the openness of the green belt is substantial. Inappropriate development in the green belt, which is substantial. The primary schools are full to the brim, is an understatement.
Sorry, Jackie, can you give me the second and third of those again, please? So the reduction in openness.
Yeah, reduction in openness of the green belt, inappropriate development in the green belt.
Inappropriate development by reason of the reduction in openness.
The reduction, yeah.
I was just going to add to that the lack of infrastructure. I mean, there's no transport links, and the GP surgery,
So
as
lack of infrastructure.
Councillor Sisterton pointed out, is massively overrun.
There are no transport links.
Great, so thank you. Councillor Heath, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I'd agree with about the transport links and the infrastructure, the doctors, the schools and everything. It is a bit of a concern.
So we feel strongly that infrastructure should be in there as a reason. Okay. Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Byrne?
Just asking, before they said the crossing was rejected because of the nature of the road. Would that be material a previous rejection? Because they're putting a crossing, which is, as far as I know, have been previously rejected because it's not a suitable road.
Well, I think where we are is committee are identifying the reasons, so it's entirely up to the committee. What I'll do is what I suggest is give officers opportunity to comment upon those reasons, and then we can draw a conclusion. But if you're minded, I'd suggest that maybe officers comment upon that in the whole, if that's okay.
So to just check where we are at the minute, so we've had a counter proposal made and seconded to reject on the grounds of reduction in openness and therefore being inappropriate development, and key points being the reduction in openness should be seen as carrying significant weight. Is that correct? Okay, and lack of infrastructure has also been mentioned. I could do with your thoughts, Lucy, on whether that is basically a valid planning reason to reject. But anyway, if you could comment on the whole, thank you.
Okay, so the openness, that is kind of your view. You can, obviously, on a professional level, I don't agree, but that could be a valid reason if you consider it is significantly affecting openness of the greenbelt. But in terms of the other points that have been raised, if you go to 8.1 of the report, so in the section 106, so any development above 10 residential units, we consult the NHS and they have got a formula by which they run the development through that and then give us a figure of what they want to mitigate the issues, the healthcare issues within that, the area that the development comes under. And with schools, we've been over it earlier in this meeting, and there would be a contribution, which again is education. Obviously, it's internal in the council, but that's a formula that the development will be run through. So, in my opinion, that has been mitigated, and it wouldn't stand up appeal. Just a warning.
Thank you, Lucy. Ashley.
So it's obviously up to the committee to make a decision. But based on what I've heard, and if there's no other reasons, what I'm going to recommend to chair and committee is that it's deferred. Officers can come back with a report based on the reasons. You will need to vote on a motion minded to refuse, but obviously you'll need to remain open-minded to receive that report. So that's my recommendation, Chair. I think members want to come back in.
Thank you, Ashley. I think we have a couple of members who want to come back in. Steve Taylor, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Chair. Whilst, if you like, in support of what people are saying, I think it's not unreasonable to challenge that the points that were in that balancing table, C, E and F. F definitely, because we don't know what that is at all at this moment in time. The economic one, being a car club, I have to say, doesn't really cut it for me. And the self-build plots, I wasn't aware there was a government target, but I'm still not convinced that that outweighs. So I accept that they're all down as some weight, but I'd have probably put, what's the other terminology that you use, limited weight, or basically bugger all. That's kind of what it's saying, and they really don't do it for me, I have to say. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Maney.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. I appreciate that. And taken on board what you've said and acknowledge about the education issues. So I don't need you to come back on the other 2 points. But I am still going to go back to the urban planning officer's arguments, I'm afraid, because they are quite strong arguments. And they're the ones that I'm most interested in, actually. I appreciate your answer, but them objections have been made and they're strong objections.
Thanks, Councillor. Does anybody else want to comment? So, Ashley, could I ask you to explain what you're recommending?
Yep. Yeah, no problem. So what we'll do, if committee agree, so suggest that we defer the item. We'll have to vote on a recommendation for mine to refuse, so that'll need to be voted upon. And if that is agreed, we'll bring a report back on the reasons that you've identified, including the reason that you've just referenced, and then committee can make a decision based on an updated officer report. I will add that I do think it is clear already in the report, but nonetheless we can add more detail in response to those reasons, and I'll just ask my legal colleague if there's anything they wish to add on that point.
No, nothing from me on that. I think what Ashley is recommending is just the usual course where there's going to be a decision contrary to an officer recommendation, but the reasons aren't necessarily fully formulated yet.
So the critical component here, members, and for you, Chair, seems to relate to Greenbelt. So if I've understood the argument correctly, are you saying that it's inappropriate development reducing openness? And that outweighs the VSC, the very special circumstances put forward. Okay, so in the report, that's what we'll need to cover. Okay.
So the motion that we are proposing is that the committee is minded to refuse, but would like to defer this to allow the officer to address our questions. I assume that still leaves the committee the option when this comes back, if they still aren't satisfied. Yeah, so you're not losing your right to refuse, we're just giving the officer the opportunity to answer those questions. I mean, we do need to be watertight on this in case it goes to appeal and we end up with egg on our faces. So that is the proposal. I would like to propose that, if you need me to repeat it, propose that we are minded to refuse, but we are going to ask the officer to come back to us with answers to the specific queries and specific issues that we raised. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Polston. All those in favour? All those against? And any abstentions? I don't think. No. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, Lucy. I appreciate that. It's quite a knotty one, and I think it bears some clarification, I think, before we make a final decision. Thank you very much. And Councillor Sisterson, you are now welcome to come back and rejoin us. Thank you, everybody. I would like to move on now to item 7, which is 164 Long Lane. This is pages 97 to 112 in your booklet. And can I ask Nadia Houghton to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I just want to double check that my screen is being shared. Okay. It's there. Okay, let's see.
Apologies for the delay, but we do need to. Thank you. People in the public gallery, can you see as well?
Hopefully everyone can see the start of the presentation. Thank you. Good evening, members, and good evening, members of the public. So this application at 164 Long Lane has been called into Planning Committee to assess and consider matters relating to increased traffic and parking relating to the proposal. The site at 164 Long Lane lies within a residential part of Grays, as can be seen here. It's on the south side of Long Lane. Here's an aerial shot of the property, and there's the main dwelling at the top of the site and the outbuilding at the southern end there. The application specifically relates to the change of use of the existing lawful outbuilding, as can be seen in this aerial image here, to be used as part of a proposed wider, larger house of multiple occupation or HMO use within the main property. Here's a floor plan of the main dwelling, which is currently used as a smaller HMO lawfully and falling within the C4 use class. The HMO team has advised the existing licence for the property is for a maximum of 7 persons in 4 households, although the applicant has confirmed there are only 5 persons living at the main property at present. As the plans show, the property has 5 bedrooms, which would each be for single households. The existing outbuilding has 4 rooms, as can be seen here. A bathroom, a kitchen, a dining area, and 2 bedrooms are proposed in the next slide there. So it's internal conversion in the main, with the only operational development relating to the insertion of 4 roof lights in a rear part of the roof slope. The existing outbuilding is used for ancillary purposes related to the overall residential use of the main dwelling. The additional roof lights proposed would provide improved natural lighting to the outbuilding, and as can be seen, it's proposed that 2 of the rooms would be used as part of the larger HMO use, and both would be used as single households, taking the maximum number of persons and households living at the property to 7. The applicant has also confirmed there will be no more than 7 persons maximum living at the property as 7 single households. In order to define the scope of the planning consent, a planning condition has been included limiting the maximum occupancy of the overall site to 7 persons in 7 single households as detailed on page 110. Here are some site images for you all. This is the main dwelling viewed from Long Lane. The site has ample off-street parking at the property for at least 4 cars on the frontage via the existing driveway. While it's appreciated the reason the application was called in was to consider the parking impacts of the application, and it's noted the neighbour concerns regarding parking, the level of provision complies with council adopted standards for the proposal and is acceptable. If members wished, a condition can be included in the recommendation to ensure that the frontage is retained for the off-street parking of cars associated with the use. One isn't included at the moment because we have an existing parking on the frontage, but if members wanted to, that could be included. This is a view of the rear of the property from the garden, and you can see the neighbouring dwellings either side on Long Lane. The rear garden is relatively long, as are many in Long Lane, and this is the outbuilding located at the end of the plot. And here's a closer image of that outbuilding, which has a part flat, part dual-pitched roof towards the rear. And there's some other recent officer photos of the interior of the outbuilding at the moment. So as you can see, it's still very much under construction and finishing within. The proposed roof lights, so you can, sorry, I'll just show you some other images inside here. So there are also some good site images taken from the properties to the south on the close. So these are taken from the rear garden of number 5, the close. So the dual pitch building there at the back beyond the rear brick wall of the property on the close is the outbuilding. The proposed 4 roof lights would be on the other side of that rear roof slope, not on the side you can see there facing the close, but on the other side facing within 164 Long Lane. There'll be no overlooking or increased loss of neighbour amenity from the proposals as detailed in the report. In that bottom right-hand image there, you can see that the outbuilding is partially located to the rear, the immediate rear of the garage at number 6, the close, as can be seen there. And this photo here just shows behind the garage in the foreground here, you can just see the top of the ridge of the outbuilding behind it. So as detailed in the report, there is no in-principle objection to the proposed change of use and minor alterations to the outbuilding. The property would be occupied by a maximum of 7 persons in 7 single households, and the resulting impact upon neighbour amenity and highway safety as a result would be considered acceptable. While it's noted that there are neighbourly behaviour concerns raised by local residents, it's not considered that these concerns would alter the overall neighbour amenity impact of the scheme as proposed, given that the increase would be from 5 to 7 persons living at the site. There will be no justifiable planning reason to refuse the application on amenity grounds, and the application is recommended for approval subject to detailed conditions. Thank you.
Thanks, Nadia. We have received a statement of objection. Excuse me. We've received a statement of objection from Anne and Bob Livermore. It can be found on page 11 of the speaker's booklet. And if you'd like to come forward to read your statement. Thank you. And Mr. Livermore, is it? Yes, I know it's a stupid question. You'll have 3 minutes. The counter will come up and then feel free to start.
Right, I would like to just preface this by saying this is not just from myself, this is from a number of neighbours. Everybody has had stuck their oar in, as it were. So I'll just read it as it stands. The property in question does not have sufficient parking to accommodate additional vehicles that will inevitably come with more residents. The road is already too busy for safe and convenient parking, and tenants of this property have previously parked across driveways and paths, causing inconvenience and is hazardous to neighbours and pedestrians, causing residents to exit their properties blind as the view of Long Lane is blocked in both directions. The level of physical traffic to and from the property is also a concern. Previous residents came and went at all hours of the day, revving engines, especially one tenant with an especially noisy motorcycle, often causing disturbed sleep for those of us with bedrooms at the front of our properties. I would like to add at this point to my statement, when this was actually initially proposed, we were led to believe that this would be a licence for 14 residents rather than just the 7 that is apparently now going to be the case. The property owner or landlord has been unresponsive to past complaints, as has the previous HMO licence holder. The owner or landlord appears to have little or no interest in the property, allowing the previous HMO licence holder to do as he pleased, so our complaints have been ignored. In addition, there are ongoing environmental concerns. Cigarette butts are often discarded on the street, and noise from the garden is a constant issue occurring at all days of the day and night, often lasting days, with music, singing and shouting. This can be heard several properties along, not just the immediate neighbours on either side. The rubbish bins are frequently overflowing and white goods dumped on the forecourt for weeks on end, attracting vermin and creating unsanitary conditions. With regard to the change of use of the outbuildings, it appeared that during the period of the previous HMO licence, these were already being used as bedrooms, showing the contempt the landlord or licence holder has for rules and regulations. This can also be illustrated in historical planning applications, a number filed retrospectively, so the owner clearly thinks he can do whatever he likes and Thurrock Council will happily approve anything. This situation is not acceptable, and we as residents should not have to endure these issues in our own homes. I would urge the Council to reconsider approving this application to prevent these problems from worsening. Thank you for your attention to this matter, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Livermore. Members of the committee, do you have any questions for Mr. Livermore? If I might ask you a question, having now had it clarified that the maximum occupation would be 7 people rather than 14, does that give you any reassurance?
No, unfortunately, because whilst the previous application was for 5, like the previous licence, there was a lot more than 5 people living there. And nothing was ever done about anything. When we mentioned it, I know how to access the HMO register with Thurrock Council because I do that as part of my job. Mm-hmm. So I was aware that it was being overpopulated, and if everybody had this is going to sound really patronising, but if everyone had behaved and played nicely, then there wouldn't have been a problem. But it's the parking across driveways, it's the bonfires in the middle of the day, screaming, shouting, you know, it's just a whole antisocial hub, if you like. And we've just had enough of it.
So
know?
It's the behaviour of the subtenants, if you like, and that's the particular issue.
Certainly, sir. It's the behaviour of the previous tenants and the attitude of the previous HMO licence holder when approached. It's like, oh, whatever, do we like? And it's been like a drip, 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 and it's got to the point when this first surfaced, as like I said, as far as we were aware, it was going to be a maximum occupation of 14, which potentially, I mean, apparently there's parking for 4 cars out the front. Yeah, if they're smart cars, not for the I think one of them had a Mercedes S-Class, so that takes up space of 2 cars. And with the extra rubbish and bins and stuff, there's very rarely any more than 2 cars parked on the forecourt, and everything else was along the verges, churning them up, blocking the view of the road. Thank you.
Thank you. So, actually, that's for me. That's okay. There's behaviour of tenants. There is the question of where cars are enabled to park, and there's also, if I understood you correctly, there's the question of if the licence, as I understand it from you, Nadia, was for 7, And that's 7 individuals, although we say individuals or households. My household's 5 people, but it's 7 one-person households. It sounds like one of the issues that you've had has been that the previous maximum of 5 was being flouted. Is that correct?
Certainly was, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Livermore, you may resume your seat. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, no, right, Councillor Byrne.
The residents, are they students or single, unemployed, or businessmen, or who are the
Absolute
actual
mixture, real mixture of everybody, and they certainly weren't all students. No, there was people that I'm assuming he went out to work at 4 o'clock in the morning on his motorbike, but you know, who knows. But no, there was a real mixture of people. If it had been students, then you know it would have been sort of a lot more obvious. But no, they were of different age groups, different races, shall we say, and just a whole mixture of everybody.
Thank you. I think you probably can resume your seat now. Thanks. Appreciate it. So, councillors, if you would like to put any questions to Nadia about the presentation. So, Councillor Polston.
I mean, it might not necessarily be a planning question, but it might be. Mr. Liverman stated that in the past it's clearly been overpopulated. If it has been, what can we do going forward? And if the landlord just doesn't play ball and doesn't, you know, do anything, what comes of that?
If I may, Chair, we consulted as part, well, there are 2 separate things here. Firstly, there's the fact that the HMO housing team are the body that issue the licence for the use of the property as a house of multiple occupation, and the current licence is for a maximum of 7 persons from 4 households. So taking the Chair's point, that would mean that within those 4 households there would be some with more than 1 individual, but there's no more than 7 persons licensed to be there. That's entirely separate from the planning merits. So the C4 use class of the main dwelling allows for up to 6 persons or 6 individual households to live there en family, so as a C3 residential dwelling, which is why it's lawful for single dwellings to become smaller HMOs without the need to apply for planning permission. Back to your question about what we can do, what options do we have with respect to over-occupancy. If it is brought to planning enforcement's attention that a property is occupied in excess of that, therefore not falling within the limits of a C4 use, we could consider enforcement action. In this instance, this application has come forward, and following dialogue with the applicant and clarifying exactly how many are living there and what's proposed in the outbuilding, the conclusion drawn within this application is that they are seeking consent for 7 persons in 7 households and no more than that. That would fall within a larger sui generis use. There's no need for enforcement action at this point, depending on the outcome of this application. But, for example, if they didn't have the outbuilding and if they were exceeding those occupancy level, we can certainly consider that. 7 isn't a great deal higher than the maximum that could be occupied lawfully. And I'll refer to that within a recent appeal decisions we've had in the last year, which are material to this assessment. But happy to take any other questions.
Okay, Councillor Lydiard, then Councillor Sisterson and Councillor Maney.
If the 2 extra households are down at the bottom of the garden, is it fair to say they probably won't cause as much nuisance as if they were sort of very close to the other properties?
Through you, Chair, I think that's a fair point. We have a lawful building with 4 rooms in it that can be used for ancillary purposes associated with the main dwelling. So that could be for kids playing games. It could be home office, occasional sleepover, you know, the usual activity. The fact that it would be used by 2 occupants as part of a larger HMO use is unlikely to lead to any material intensification of the use of the site that would be harmful to neighbour amenity.
Councillor, who's next? Councillor Sisterson?
Yeah, thank you. It's just really unclear from the wording of the report. It keeps saying to a maximum of 7 persons or 7 households. Now that implies that it could, as the speaker thought, it could easily be 14 people. So it's just not clear from the wording that it's limited to 7 people.
Okay, thank you for the point. And that really comes back to the definition of HMOs. So because you could have, and this is slightly different, but you could have up to 6 individuals living within a single dwelling as 6 individual households with their own front door as their bedroom door as such. I take your point, but in this case, this is absolutely 7 households and a maximum of 7 persons. If there's any wording you would like us to consider including, or you'd want to include within condition 3, I could look at that if that would be helpful. So on page 110 and 11, we refer to defining the use. So the main property and including the outbuilding shall be used as a larger HMO falling under the sui generis use. The main dwelling and outbuilding on the site shall be used for this use only and for no other sui generis use, and shall be occupied by no more than 7 persons or a maximum of 7 households. If I go on to state that, in particular, the outbuilding, which shall be used as part of the wider HMO use, shall be occupied by no more than 2 persons or 2 households in total, ensuring that the overall level of occupancy does not exceed 7 persons or 7 households. After the word households, I could look at including, before households, 7 single households, if that would make things clearer.
I do think that's where we're struggling, because
Yep.
my household's 5 people. My great-great-grandfather had 2 rooms and he had 14 kids. So it depends how you define a household. If I understand what you're saying, a household equals a front door.
Yeah, but it's single household, single occupancy households.
And I think we probably need to be just a bit clearer on that.
I can look at that, certainly. But the point is absolutely no more than 7 persons living there, because that is what the applicant has sought. That's what we've clarified with them, and we wanted to condition, restrict the condition as such.
Councillor, I think it's Councillor Maney, then Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. This probably would have been a question better posed to Mr. Livermore, but if there were a number of antisocial behaviour complaints, that would obviously affect your decision to give a licence, I would assume.
Through your Chair, the Local Planning Authority does not give HMO licences. That's the housing team that would give those and consider those. It's not a matter for a material planning consideration in this instance. We're considering the use, the number of people, impacts on neighbour amenity and parking, not matters of licence at all.
Councillor Byrne?
Yeah. How does this work with guests? Like, you've got 7 people. Say I've got one of these bedrooms on my own and I meet a girl and I want to bring her over as a guest for the next 3 months. Is that okay, or has it got to be 7? Because I say she can't stay the night, or is it 7 written in stone? It's just...
Through you, Chair, I'm not an expert on HMO licence legislation as a town planner, but my honest view would be that if someone may stay overnight, like you might stay overnight at somebody else's home, you're not living there, it's not your permanent residence, so that may be okay. But if somebody then resides there, as in your example of 3 months, and that would not be part of the HMO licence, they'd have to be included. So that they could be in breach of that, but that would fall under separate legislation that I'm not at all familiar with, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Thanks. Do we have any more questions? Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. Just focusing in on the outbuilding. I mean, when I initially looked at it, I thought it was absolutely huge. I can't really, I've not really seen too many good pictures of it, but I was always under the impression it needed to be about at least a metre away from the fence so you can maintain the outside of the building. I've looked at the retrospective planning application, so I assume it is in compliance with a pitched roof as well. I thought flat roof maybe, but if they're going to add a pitched roof. So how are we looking there? Is it a metre away from all angles? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Really good question from Councillor Kelly. And the site does have, as you can see, a detailed history. If I go back to the aerial imagery, hopefully you can make this out. So you can see it's really in two parts. You've got a dual pitch outbuilding at the rearmost part of the site. And, you know, the site has its permitted development rights, like many others in the area, and outbuildings can go up to and indeed on the boundary, as long as they don't encroach, without necessarily needing planning permission. In this case, we've got an outbuilding that's been erected lawfully. We then had an extension to the outbuilding as detailed in the planning history in 2017 that was approved. And as the report details, it wasn't quite built in accordance with those approved plans. It was built ever so slightly wider, didn't have the bifold doors in that they were originally proposing. They replaced those with 2 smaller windows and a front door. But what is on site is lawful, you know, with exception to the little bit that was slightly wider that is now lawful via the passage of time. Passage of time, there is no breach of planning control that can be actioned here in terms of the structure itself. It's really about the use that's proposed. But I take your point, but it's not uncommon to have relatively substantial outbuildings in this location, and indeed there has been a planning enforcement history for this site and a neighbouring property where there's been several complaints over the years regarding various developments in the garden.
Yeah, and just picking up, I mean, I didn't think you could get away with that big, that large, and obviously they've obviously got drainage going to the building at the back there. It just seems, I'm just surprised that you can almost get away with that. I'm almost tempted to put an application for my back garden. I just did not think you could get away with something that large. And unfortunately, I'll probably bring it up in debate, Chair, but yeah, it's not really a question. I'm just really perplexed at that. And they've submitted the applications, they've not built it out as agreed. I've looked, the retrospective looked really nice. That doesn't look very nice. It's, yeah, real messy. Yeah, just really surprised, Chair. And again, it's really the frustrations with planning. Look what we had on the first item, a very small extension just to, that was against the rules. That, oh yeah, knock yourself out. It's bizarre, but okay. No question.
Actually, a quite large but necessary extension, I would have said. But it does seem that, I mean, if I might just sort of come in on the back of that question, it does seem that we're looking at, given the history, given the evidence we've had from the neighbours, we are looking at quite a lot of potential for the conditions of permissions of approval, conditions of approval, excuse me, to be perhaps ignored. And I think, if I understand it rightly, and I was a little confused, we mentioned over-occupancy. I think at one point you mentioned the planning enforcement team, but then if I understand it rightly, you then said, no, this is not planning, it's for licensing. So who would be the correct enforcement authority if there were to be more than 7 people living in that property?
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate Councillor Kelly's comments. If there is a breach of planning control regarding the number of people living at a property such that there is a material change of use has occurred, planning enforcement can investigate the matter. In this case, we are advised that there are 5 persons living at the property at the moment. This application is a proposal, so there is no current breach of planning control at the site at all, nor indeed given the appearance of the outbuilding at all, or what's built there, that is lawful. And I appreciate what Councillor Kelly referred to in terms of it seems rather large. Permitted development does allow for large outbuildings in properties, and these are large plots. And subject to the criteria, there wouldn't be a breach of planning control with regards what's been built there. So, you know, there's a lot you can basically do under Class E of the GPDO. With respect to who is responsible, with HMOs, a licence is required, whether that's a smaller C4 use HMO or a larger one. And the housing team have their own guidance and legislation covering that. That's entirely separate from planning. If, using the neighbours' concerns as an example, if 14 people were living at that property, including in the outbuilding, and that would be, in this case, a breach of both the planning condition that's specified and would be a breach of planning control with the house, we could take planning enforcement action. But if you've got up to 7 people living there and it falls within what we've given permission for, there's nothing from a planning perspective that we could do.
Okay, thank you. And I'm guessing in terms of the behaviour of those individuals, that would be something that is probably better referred to the antisocial behaviour team. But
absolutely, Chair.
Sorry, the question was coming. But in terms of the parking and the fact that, from the sound of it, the parking is not being restricted to the 4 spaces in front of the house, what is possible there in terms of permission under conditions?
Thank you, Chair. So, absolutely, any antisocial behaviour and unneighbourliness would fall under separate legislation outside of planning controls. With respect to parking, the adopted parking standards would seek 2 off-street parking spaces for a property of this size, and indeed for an HMO for up to 7 persons, only 2 spaces are required. So the site complies with that. I have suggested to members if they wanted to include a condition to ensure the frontage is used for parking, we can do that. It's already a driveway, it already provides parking. That would not necessarily make individual members of the public living there use them in the same way. We can't always enforce people to use their own garaging and driveways, but we can impose that condition if members so wish.
Thank you. Councillor Sisterson.
Thank you. Just on that parking issue, is it actually possible, if there was 3 cars there already, could a 4th car get in there without blocking the others in? Because these are separate households, so you'd need to be individually accessible, wouldn't they?
Thank you, Chair. If I go down to the photographs, there are 2 existing openings on the driveway. This is the main vehicle access in. The other one is somewhat more restricted because of there is a lamppost nearby, but it can be used to go in and out, and there is certainly capacity to move 4 spaces within the site, and certainly, you know, there isn't an issue with 2. And often the level of occupancy or the level of car ownership within HMO properties, it tends to be less anyway than in larger family homes, but we apply the same standard to both larger family homes as we do for these HMOs.
Thank you, Nadia. Any further questions? Shall we move on to debate? Okay, who would like to start? Councillor Lydiard.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, given the fact that we've got over 150 families been sent out of the borough because of homelessness and lack of accommodation, I think it's really important that we do have as many HMOs as we need to accommodate single people. So with that in mind, I'm inclined to agree with the proposal.
Thanks, Councillor. Anybody else? Councillor Sisterson?
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree as well, because 7, you can have, like you say, you've got 5 in your house, we've had 5 in ours, and, you know, it's not actually much bigger than a family unit might be in a house that size. And also looking at the slides, the size of the outbuilding, it didn't look particularly bigger than neighbours' outbuildings. So, yeah. But I can see, you know, you might feel differently, obviously, if you did live next door and you were worried about the antisocial behaviour. I can recognise those concerns. But, yeah.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Heath?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Councillor Sisterson. You know, the extra 2 people isn't that many. And if there are issues with overcrowding or antisocial behaviour, then that's a different issue. I don't think we can really base our decision on that at this meeting.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Kelly?
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, HMOs are a real problem. I think we do need to be careful. If it was a family of 5, obviously you'd have a mum, dad, 3 children as a general rule. And, you know, it's actually quite rare that, you know, a lot let's just say they lived there for 20, 25 years. I mean, it's only when the kids turn 17, 18, 19 that they get cars, and let's face it, they don't hang around long. So it is a problem. And at the end of the day, people living in these HMOs, you know, they're going to have boyfriends, girlfriends, they're going to be coming over. We know enforcement's poor. And I think for me personally, if it was a HMO, I think that the house in itself is enough. I absolutely don't think that we should be allowing outbuildings on top of HMO households. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. It is a problem. It would appear we're very limited to what we can do here this evening. Yeah, it's other than sympathy, and I just don't know what to do. I can reject it, but we all know what's going to happen. It's just going to go to appeal, and they're going to sign it off. Yeah, unfortunately, it's a nightmare that I don't think realistically there's too much we can do about from a planning perspective, other than keep an eye on it and pray that they behave themselves. But without doubt, it's a nightmare. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. I have to say I'm very much in agreement with you. My understanding from what I've heard is that from the planning point of view, there is a limited amount we can do. The licence, if I understand it rightly, Nadia, the current licence is for 7 people. The outbuilding is lawful. However, whatever the history of putting it up and then getting permission, if it's been adjudged lawful, there's a limited amount. There's nothing we can do there. The issues, as I understand them, seem to be around 3 things: overpopulation, antisocial activity, and parking extending across the street and basically making it more difficult for other residents to park. I'm guessing that the antisocial activity probably can be best addressed via the antisocial behaviour team. We are not in a position from the planning point of view I can't think, are there any conditions we can put in around behaviour? So limited amount we can do there. Overpopulation, if I understand it, whether it's via the planning enforcement team or whether it's via licensing, yes, that's something we can do, but only effectively once we've given permission. And then as far as the parking, that I'm a little, I'm less clear on. Is there anything we can do about the parking apart from 2?
If I may, Chair, there is more than adequate off-street parking that meets our adopted standards. So we don't need to do anything to make that any more acceptable. But if members wanted to, we could include a condition whereby we retain that parking so it's not lost and used for other purposes. You know, that's a small thing. I do accept that in the situation, but that's as much as we could do in the circumstance.
So it does rather suggest that we are not really in a position. I mean, we could reject the recommendation. It sounds like it would come bouncing straight back at us. We could agree with the recommendation but with conditions. They will have a limited effect in that we can have some form of recommendation around parking. We can't, well, I say we can't make a condition around overpopulation. Overpopulation would be a breach.
If I may, Chair, 'cause I appreciate we're in debate, but we can.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just
no, I
turning around in my own head.
You're also you're thinking aloud as well, and I'm wanting to some further advice. So, condition 3 limits and restricts the maximum number of occupants. That is the strongest tool in our recommendation that we could actively enforce against if there was a breach of. We could serve a breach of condition notice if there is clearly a breach of that. I'm pretty sure we would find out about that if there was, because of the residents' strength of feeling. There are absolutely limited things we can do in terms of antisocial behaviour from planning, but there are other teams and other legislation that's available for the public in that regard in terms of recourse. There isn't a great deal more we could do in terms of parking. And yeah, the last thing I'd really advise is we did have this very recent appeal in Tilbury for a larger HMO use for more occupants that we did refuse, and a terraced property with no off-street parking, with no vehicle access, and the planning inspectorate within the last year shot that down and said, no, there's capacity on the street, 8 or 9 people there, it's no different to a family of 6. It's not really any different in terms of its character impact, its intensification of the use of the site, which was the angle that we went with, given it's a terraced property. This is a larger plot in Long Lane with more on-street parking available, with off-street parking available, with a large garden with ample separation from other properties and from other neighbours, and a reduced number of occupants there. I really couldn't see this stacking up at appeal at all, which is why we referred to it in the report. And I do understand and sympathise that there is a need to provide a variety of accommodation and homes for people. And I appreciate the change that it brings to areas as well. But from a planning perspective, I think we've done all we can within this recommendation and the conditions included.
Thanks, Nadia. So it appears relatively straightforward. Of the 3 issues, overpopulation, antisocial behaviour and parking, overpopulation, we have a condition in there which would allow us to enforce. Antisocial behaviour, we can't put a condition in there as part of the planning, but I think we ought to have a word with I will take it on myself to have a word with the antisocial behaviour team and see what we can do to get people down there and take a look at it. Parking, it sounds like about all we could do there is to put a condition in around ensuring that the frontage of the house is used so that the parking doesn't all spread across the rest of the street. And that's basically all the power that we really have. However, that said, you can still choose to agree or disagree with the recommendation. Councillor Sisterson.
Sorry, just a quick one. Can we be sure to include that change of wording to the single households?
Through you, Chair, I've already added it. Yeah. Thank you.
Are there any more comments, any more thoughts? Shall I proceed to the vote? Okay, so the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. Do I have a proposer for that? Councillor Lydiard. Seconder? Councillor Maney. Right, is that part of this vote? Yeah, right, so that's approved subject to conditions, including the extra conditions that we've asked for. Are you still prepared to propose that? Yeah? I'll second that. Those in favour? Thank you. So in terms of the planning permission, that's been approved. We will, I think we need to talk about the antisocial behaviour and find another way of dealing with it. But we will find another way of dealing with it. Okay, thank you very much. The next item is agenda item 8. It's a difficult one. It's 1 to 8, Thurrock Shopping Park. Please note there are 2 reports for this, one being the update report and the other being the report considered at committee last year, which is the appendix. Hope that makes sense. May I ask Chris Purvis to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. You've covered just what I was about to say about the 2 reports, so thank you for doing that. So this is an application that went to Planning Committee on the 30th of November last year, resolved to approve by this Planning Committee subject to conditions and the completion of a Section 106 agreement. Since then, officers have been working with the applicant and the agent, but there needs to be some changes to some of the planning obligations from the Section 106 legal agreement before we issue the planning permission. So the planning permission hasn't been issued yet. We obviously have been working on the 106, as I mentioned. So the changes in regard to cycle and pedestrian network improvements, that's now being looked at as a condition, and there's an additional condition on the update report, which is the smaller report of the 2 that's on the agenda, and that's the report you need to look at. And the other 2 points are some changes in terms of reservation of the land for the access for a period now of 5 years rather than being open-ended, and the other one is in regarding the bus route diversion of bus stops. There is a fallback position if that can't be achieved with an alternative financial contribution. As a recap, this planning application seeks full permission for the demolition of the existing buildings and clearance of the site to allow for redevelopment of the site to provide warehousing floor space within use class B8, a storage and distribution use comprising 1 2-level building with 2 units, one on top of each other, with a total floor space of just over 61,000 square metres, together with associated access, including a ramp bridge section to the north and west of the building, on the ground and first floors level parking, and associated infrastructure and landscaping. I shall just flick through a few slides just to remind the committee of what was considered last year. And there's 2 slides in regard to the cycle pedestrian and the reservation of land, just so members are aware of that. It's on screen. Oh, yeah. So that's the red line application site, and there's area of blue land just to the, which is actually to the northeast. North is to the west of, to the right of this document. That's a better idea in terms of seeing the Thurrock Shopping Park, where the T-Max and L-shaped building is there, and the car park. That would all go in favour of this proposed development, which I said you've already approved back in November. That's the existing layout plan. There's some visuals of the site as existing, and some site photos of the site as existing. A couple more. That's the ground floor of one of the units. So it's a big warehouse building with lorries loading bay to the west elevation. Front elevation faces onto Western Avenue, where there's a car park and more greenery proposed than what's there at present. That's the first floor, access via a ramp at the end of this Western Avenue on the north side. So that's shown there. Elevations, appreciate they might not be the easiest to follow. The top one is the front elevation. There's a better CGI coming that shows that more clearly. The second one down is the rear elevation, which is what you'd see if you're travelling along the M25. If I move on to the next couple of slides, that makes it a bit more clearer. So that's the front elevation, and that's the rear elevation. And there's some screening shown to try and screen the lorry parking visual impact of that from if you were travelling past on the M25. So this is what's more important in terms of this update application. This is a plan that you wouldn't have seen last time. This is what's been discussed with our highways team in terms of trying to secure the pedestrian and cycle improvements. This is an indicative plan of what that might look like. So that's shown there, but the agreement will be for a planning condition to get the finer details properly agreed after permission's been after a planning permission's been issued. And the other point was 3 points, but the other point about the land to be reserved for the access, where the decathlon plot is there and that car park, that's all in the ownership of the applicants. So it's there where a highways team wanted a potential future access. It's not proposed for this application, but the land is reserved for that purpose in the future, should that be needed. So there'll be a different form of access to what's shown there at present. There's just a left-in access on the northbound carriageway at present. An option could be that there be an exit onto the northbound carriageway and potentially a traffic junction that would allow people coming on the southbound to turn into that shopping park. And the reason for that is it relieves pressure from the roundabout to the south, the one that serves the McDonald's and Western Avenue area there, and the Tesco and the other retail park to the east. So that's being looked at as well. As I said, there's bus routes and bus stops, route diversion strategies being considered along with bus stops, but there is an alternative of a financial contribution if that can't be achieved. And I say if that can't be achieved, but that requires the applicant to negotiate with the bus operators, and so they're a bit in the hands of the bus operator in that respect. But things have been discussed with them already, just haven't got to that position yet. But we're in a position where we still want to just issue this planning permission. So the report sets out the changes and the recommendation, and it is that update report that's crucial to your consideration tonight. We're not looking to revisit any of the previous considerations of the application that you considered in November for the development, its appearance, and all those sorts of things. It is just to focus on those 3 bullet points, and the recommendation is to approve those. And if that committee does approve them, we can then finalise the 106, include the additional condition, and then get the planning permission issued quite quickly, hopefully. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Chris. So, any questions for Chris? Councillor Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. So that does sound impressive if you could have the north access out of the site. Would that be a case where you could come up that road, turn left, go into it would be the first floor of the development, and then you could come out and then go north? Is that, if you understand what I'm saying there?
That land for being reserved is just for the purpose of the 106, just to reserve the land. In terms of the development, that would use Western Avenue, just to the left of on this slide here. That's where the bridge and the ramped access will then go around the northern part of the site and then allow for the car parking and the lorry access. So the reserve land here, that is separate to it. That's in terms of future development if Decathlon but it's that block. If that needs an in and out access to take traffic away from using Western Avenue, because cars at the present, as you probably experienced, and I've been there as well, you can get into you leave that site via Western Avenue coming down south to the roundabout, because you can't actually get back onto the B186 at that point. I mean, highways have looked at that, and Julie might want to comment, but that's to help avoid conflicts between cars in the future and HGVs using that ramp. So that's why that's being looked at.
Yeah, no, really good, really positive. Could you show us the pedestrian link again? Sorry, and the cycle path. I didn't know what I was looking at when you showed me the. So what am I looking at here? So.
Yeah, just to clarify. So this is the roundabout at the end of Western Avenue where the shopping park site is at present. That's Western Avenue. That's where the Sports Direct building is. And so this little bit of Western Avenue links these two roundabouts. So what we're looking at here, again, to try and create sustainable transport options for staff, for visitors to this site, is to have a pedestrian and cycle route, improving this path here, and that links to there, and then that's shown as well with some insets as improvements. And then it's hoped that can link up to the wider cycle pedestrian network. Julian, did you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What the proposal is, additionally to that, that zebra crossing will change to a dual crossing. So obviously you'll be able to cycle a dual crossing. So you'll be able to cycle and walk across the crossing, whereas at the moment as a zebra crossing, obviously as you can't cycle across, you have to dismount. That will link to the current cycle network on the opposite side of the B186. In addition, there's a little link down in the south that will link to the cycle network on the southern side of West Thurrock Way that runs all the way along West Thurrock Way. Plus, we've actually put a link within the West Thurrock Green development, a cycle link to link through to Motherwell Way at the moment, with the potential feasibility, not as part of this development, but future transport to link to London Road, because at the moment National Highways are looking at changing the access for cyclists to the A282. So they will change it. At the moment you cycle up the 282 from junction 31, but they're looking to actually do that from the bottom underneath the bridge from London Road and cycle up there. So that would also aid in linking potentially to that future change.
Councillor Sisterson.
So, as part of that wider cycle network, I know it's not part of this application, but further up at the top where the 1306 road goes across the top there, I do cycle and it doesn't work very well because you can't cross the road on, if you go up from this development and then the cycle path you meant to sort of go left and cross there, there's no, the traffic doesn't stop, you can't get across. So it's much better to go along, turn right at the top there and cross where the bus stop is. So just as a pointer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that's exactly what I do if I'm cycling in that route. The big problem in that area is junction 31 for cyclists. It's a bit difficult to get across junction 31, but yes, I'll use that little traffic island up by the bus stop to cross because that's probably the best place. But at least we're providing a link for them from that development where there's no link at the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be better. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any more questions? Let's move to the debate then. Who would like to start? Councillor Kelly?
Yeah, thank you. Other than to say, look, I think it's obviously a brilliant bit of regeneration. I remember when we approved it nearly 12 months ago, and yeah, just fantastic to see us all coming along nicely. So yeah, good work, keep it up, and yeah, that north access looks, yeah, that will be impressive, hopefully. And I think it also, I think really the message there is that we are going to see generation at that top part. So yeah, brilliant, really good stuff.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else got any comments to make? Okay, let's proceed to the vote then. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to conditions and obligations. And obviously those are set out in the report you've been given. So do I have a proposer for that? Councillor Lydiard, sorry. And a seconder? Councillor Heath? Sorry, Tom, nothing personal. All those in favour? Thank you. So, recommendation is agreed. Which brings us on to item 9, last item on the agenda. So this is a TPO for 78 St Michael's Close. Okay, thanks. Cheers, Tom. So can I ask, I believe it's Nadia, you're going to present the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent. So this application for a tree preservation order and tree removal has been called into Planning Committee to consider the character impact of the proposal. It's a site location plan, and as you can see, the application site forms part of the rear gardens of 76 and 78 St Michael's Close at the end of a cul-de-sac. The site backs onto the recent development of the former Aveley Football Club ground to the east. You can see in the aerial here, I've circled the same trees there. So you've got the newer development of the football club to the immediate east of it, and St Michael's Close, and the two properties at the very end of the cul-de-sac there. The application is to fell 2 oak trees in the rear gardens of the above properties. The application has been submitted on the basis that the roots of the trees are causing shrinkage to the ground at the rear of the properties, and as a result, damage is being caused to the conservatory at the rear of number 78. These photographs show some images of the trees on site. So as you can see, there's a fence separating the two, but these 2 trees in the immediate centre of the picture there are the 2 oak trees in question. And they show the impact of the trees on the area at the rear of number 78. You can see the close proximity of that oak tree to the patio there in that top right image. I've tried to capture the image of the trees in the proximity to the start of the conservatory and the patio there. So the trees are particularly close to the conservatory and are split either side of the fence there. These other photos on the screen now show that the trees have limited amenity value to the public, as at the rear of the gardens and set away from the public areas and not in any of the main streets. So this is the view of St Michael's Close. You can just see the very tops of one of the oak trees there. I've included in this area, because where this photo was taken from, it's within the garage parking court south, further along St Michael's Close, just marked on with the red X there, looking through the parking court, and it's actually the darker green tree in the furthest background of the collection of 3 trees, and the one on the right. It's not this smaller one that's a slightly lighter shade of green, so to speak. It's those two oak trees there. And that's taken from St Michael's Close. Here are the trees when viewed from Bellhouse Avenue. Officers looked from all the possible parking courts and public viewpoints to see what the vantage and the amenity value would be. But as you can see, they don't actually contribute a great deal to the public realm or from the immediate street scene. That's from Courts Way, and because they do sit in the rear gardens. And that's the wider image of Courts Way, showing one of the trees there. And that's looking from behind the terrace at Courts Way across the back gardens, and you can just make out the trees there in the distance. So the council's arboricultural officer has reviewed the submission and notes that the trees are considered to be causing structural damage to the conservatory at number 78. He advises there's no practical way to retain the trees by routine maintenance. He also advises that the trees have limited amenity value, and given their limited viewpoints, further notes that they wouldn't pass the current TPO evaluation to warrant protection now. The report submitted by the applicant also indicates that if the trees are felled, the works to repair the conservatory could amount to around £5,000. If the trees were to remain, the conservatory would need to be demolished and rebuilt, or another engineering solution would need to be required. These would cost a minimum of £15,000. As detailed in paragraphs 7.1 and 7.2 of your report, Legislation relating to preserved trees indicates that a person is entitled to compensation if they can establish that the damage is caused by the preserved tree, with the local planning authority refusing permission to fell. So we are at risk there. So whilst the loss of trees is always regrettable, given the foregoing and in the view of the professional arboriculturalist, that the trees have very little amenity value, in this instance it's considered appropriate to give consent for the 2 trees to be felled. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Nadia. Any questions? Jackie, then Gary.
Thank you, Chair. The report says that if the trees were assessed now, they wouldn't pass the test or the criteria for a TPO. Why?
Through you, Chair, that's essentially because of their location and their amenity value in terms of how visible they are to the public realm and what value they add to visual amenity in that regard. So essentially, they're at the back, they're not of the best quality, and they don't provide the amenity value in the street scene or in the public realm that they might, given their location.
Thank you. So, really then, there's going to be a lot of trees in the borough then that have got TPO on them that could be subject to people wanting to put in an application and fail them. Because, I mean, I appreciate what you say about the amenity value, and I appreciate that, but tell that to the birds.
I appreciate that was more of a statement, Chair, as well, but obviously...
I think there was a question embedded in it.
The question within that was really regarding the quality and value of trees. All trees are unique and different, and obviously they will grow and are located in different positions. These particular trees have been assessed. The TPOs date from 2011, so it isn't like they're from decades and decades ago, but the way they've grown and their location has been considered, and as I say, the arboricultural officer does not consider that they would warrant a TPO now if they were considered afresh, so to speak. Because of their location, and we can only take that view from those experts. That does not mean every large oak tree or tree that's a great specimen in the back garden isn't worthy in this instance, in this location, and given the trees in particular, that's what the specialist recommends.
Sorry, just to come in on the back of one, just on a point of clarification. I mean, you say that, 2011. It's under 5.1, it says the original TPO on these trees was 1989, so it goes back a reasonable way.
Chair, if you don't mind, I think that's wider TPOs in that area, bearing in mind you've got the Aveley Football Club development that was more historic, that immediately abuts the site. But these specific 2 TPOs dated were established in 2011. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Byrne.
So the houses, I guess, were there in 2011. Right. And we are paying for any work, the council are, or the residents are, in effect. Yeah.
Through you, Chair, the authority is not paying for anything. We are at risk of paying compensation if we do not grant consent by virtue of potentially being found to be liable for the damage and refusing consent if we did that.
Councillor Maney and then Councillor Sisterson. Oh,
sorry, Kath.
Sorry, Councillor Byrne, did you want to come back on that response? Apologies.
The £5,007.75, who foots the bill for that?
We aren't paying anything.
We're not?
We're not paying it. The local authority isn't paying anything.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. I think it's Councillor Maney next, then Councillor Sisterson.
Thank you again, Chair. Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't. These 2 trees do have TPOs on them, and I mean, if they didn't, we wouldn't be wasting the committee's time this evening. I'm just a bit confused. we've got to the point where they've got a TPO, but actually they don't meet the criteria now, so we'll lob them down anyway. I mean, that just does not sit comfortable with me. I mean, aside of the fact I do object to people buying houses that already have trees there and then deciding that actually they're going to take them down anyway. I appreciate that this could be undermining their conservatory. There is no guarantee that it is undermining the conservatory. And yeah, I mean, I know you can't comment on past officers and their assessments, but it just concerns me greatly that we have trees with TPOs on that can now come down, and they wouldn't be assessed as requiring a TPO now. I just wonder if this is just going to open the floodgates for people with trees with TPOs to put them in front of us and say, well, my conservatory's on the wobble.
Through you, Chair, I take your point. I think each tree species is different, each location is different. The health of a particular tree and its amenity value will be different on different locations. And it is regrettable. It's not something the authority would want to choose to do, but we have to weigh up those risks, and we have to bear in mind those specialist reports and the subsidence that is referenced and evidenced, unfortunately. But I take your point.
Councillor Sisterson.
Just here's a question: if we have a tree with a TPO, have we got any responsibility for looking after that tree?
I'm not a tree expert, through your chair, but if the tree is in somebody else's garden that is a separate landowner, it is not the responsibility of the local planning authority in that sense. We control its protection, but we are not liable for the tree in itself. That's a separate issue in terms of compensation and damage and things. What I'm asking really is, the resident bought that house with the tree with the TPO. Would there not be some responsibility put on him or her? So we've got an oak tree in our garden, and every year we cut it back because we don't want it to grow too big. If they'd have done that from the beginning, from 2011, it wouldn't be in the position where we'd have to cut the tree down. So I think, I understand that it's unlikely we're going to be able to save these ones maybe, but just going forward, could it not be, sort of incumbent on them to actually look after them so we're not in this position, so we are doing something to protect. Yeah, through you, Chair, I take your point. I think maintenance is always encouraged and would have to be applied for, and consent to do that. Any crowning or treatment or any lopping of any branches, say. In this instance, I think we have an issue with the roots, that's my understanding, and that's caused the damage. Whether applied for maintenance of the TPO would have changed anything, I honestly don't know. We can only go by what the agricultural officer has advised in this instance. But I understand the point that's been raised.
Anybody else with a question for Nadia? Okay, so let's go on to the debate. Who would like to start? Councillor Paulson.
I'm just going to set it out as, unfortunately, I don't think that there's anything we can do for these ones at this point. And given the council's overall priority, we need to also consider the costs of not approving this. So that's where I stand on the position of this.
Thanks, Councillor. Anybody else care to? Councillor Maney?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I agree with you entirely, Ryan, on that. Councillor Paulson, I agree with you. It is going to be with a heavy heart that I'm going to have to vote for this, to be honest, and we've all got a responsibility to protect the council from any future costs that could come our way, but I've got to say I am not at all happy, not in any way, shape or form. It doesn't, heavy heart this.
Anybody else? Councillor Sisterson.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of them. But I just think it's a shame. I think it's sad that trees are only looked at in terms of our amenity, because they've got an intrinsic value to themselves and to the wildlife that it supports. So, and they're also carbon, they absorb carbon, you know. So I think we could maybe look beyond our personal amenity. That's my point of view.
Thanks, Councillor. I'd have to say, it seems, as Councillor Paulson says, it seems fairly clear-cut. These particular trees, as I understand it, have become candidates for the CHOP because of the potential damage they're doing to a building. You could argue about the sense of putting a conservatory right next to a tree that, you know, oh my God, it's got roots, has it? But unfortunately, it does appear that our position is fairly clear, that if we were to refuse to do anything, it would cost us money. And as our group leader is fond of saying, bankrupt council, we do have to be a bit careful of the pennies. So, yeah, I like trees, and I don't like getting rid of trees for no good reason. I think in the case of this one, there is probably tree versus conservatory, and we unfortunately have to accept that we have a liability, we have a responsibility, and we've just got to do it. I do think, though, it's just one point I would make is that it does concern me a little that we can have trees protected and then we give planning permission for building, and that then changes the what's the word? The status of those trees. Because were this estate not to have been built, those trees would still be enjoying their TPO. So perhaps when we look at applications for new builds, we might want to think about any protected trees in the area and just look ahead a bit and think, are we possibly signing their death warrant? God, I sound like I should be wearing sandals, but...
If through you, Chair, if you don't mind, just to really provide a bit more context, but there was an application in 2017 to reduce the crown by 30%. So there has been some maintenance over the years, but this, to my mind, shows the importance, as the point you make, Chair, of conditions, of really thinking about the conditions. I was always taught when I was going into town planning, it's the start and the end of the report and the assessment that's the most vital. The conditions, the important thing, not the thing that you can just say, okay, that's fine, that's a job done. And making sure the condition does what you want it to do is important. So that is something to bear in mind with sites where there are established trees. And it is their visual amenity value, not something, you know, in terms of general amenity. And it does change over time with developments that come. So I do appreciate that. And one final thing I wanted just to say is that we don't do this lightly, as I said, and we do defend appeals where we have sought to retain TPOs and refused consents. And I know there's one that the Vice Chair is keen on in Tilbury, and that appeal is still pending with the Inspectorate, and we're still very much trying to make sure that sycamore does not get lost on felled. So it's not something the Council does lightly at all, and this is a particularly unusual situation, I think. Sorry, I know I've interjected in the debate, but I hope that's appreciated.
No, thank you, Nadia, that was helpful. I think we should probably go to the vote. So the recommendation is to approve. May I have a proposer? Councillor Polston, a seconder? Councillor Lydiard? All those in favour? You can say no, you can abstain. So we're all tree killers together. I hope you sleep well tonight. Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it's been a long evening. Thank you for your deliberation on these matters. And I was going to say enjoy the rest of your evening. Yeah, enjoy your early morning. Thanks again, and thank you, officers, for your input and your support. Thank you. I declare this meeting closed.